them on the list. Has anybody heard from Dan?
Oh,
Hey guys, can you hear me?
is that Hugh?
Yep.
Hey guys.
All right, make sure Chief's on here. There he is. I don't have video. Chief, are you supposed to, do you have your video on yet? You're on mute.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, Todd's aware that he needs to share my screen.
Okay, great. Okay, well, it's 6 o'clock. We have all our council members present with the exception of Dan. So we will take note of that. It's not, we don't formally take attendance, but we'll make note that he is not with us at this point. So Chief, floor is yours. We're going to be talking about upcoming PD staffing needs.
Outstanding. Thank you. And thank everyone for being present a little bit early this week for this meeting for this presentation. I'll keep it short and sweet. Everyone, I hope, has had a chance to read my proposal. Can everyone see my screen here? I'm not.
Not yet.
Not yet, no.
Okay. I'll give Todd a few minutes to bring that up. And if you can just let me know when you're able to see the PowerPoint there.
You should be able to share the screen.
Oh, you should be able to share your screen, he says.
I should be able to, huh? Let me see.
Oh, there's Dan. Hi, Dan. Okay, Todd said he can share it on your behalf if you want to.
Oh, yeah.
There it is.
Now, I feel like I'm teaching at Purdue again here. I forgot I could do that. Let me see. There we go. Okay, we good to go?
Looks like it.
Outstanding. Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone, again. I'll keep this short and sweet and to the point, and leave any time that we need to answer any questions. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of questions here regarding my proposal. So in this presentation, I'm going to discuss a couple of things. I want to just briefly remind everyone of our vision and our direction, my vision and direction that I want the agency to go, our current staffing models, what I look at, and most law enforcement executives look at how they determine the amount of staffing that they need, why we're asking for additional staff, the cost summary, what our new organizational structure will look like if we are granted permission to hire a new officer, and then answer any questions. So what I like to do when I present is have everyone answer or hold any questions that you have until the end of the presentation. That way I can keep all of my thoughts in line and make sure I get all the information out that I like. So I like people to keep a parking lot. And the parking lot is just you writing down any information or any questions that you have, and we can visit those questions at the end of the presentation. I know a lot of times when there's presentations, there's a lot of questions asked, and then the next slide actually answers the question. So, we don't want to slow things down, and I kind of want to keep things moving here. So if you have any questions, just write those down and I'll try to answer. Hopefully I can answer those at the end of the presentation. If not, I can find the answer for those and get your answers to you speedily. Is this blocking? Okay. All right, hopefully that works. All right. So my vision and direction that I want to see the agency go is pretty simple. I want us to be, and all the officers at the Liberty Lake Police Department, to be highly trained, equipped, and dedicated to the mission of the agency. I feel that if we can do this, we'll be able to provide our community with outstanding service and be able to achieve this vision adequately. And the only way we can do that is if we're adequately staffed. Currently, our patrol portion of our agency, our patrol division, consists of 8 patrol officers. These officers are assigned to 4 different teams, 2 day shift teams and 2 night shift teams. Each team is supervised by 1 patrol sergeant. Just as a side note, I am not counting our school resource officer as assigned to patrol. After examining, after being a school resource officer, of course, from experience, speaking with several other law enforcement executives from our area, and also discussing this with our 3 sergeants, our school resource officers actually, when it comes to patrol, they're actually kind of a quarter officer, because 3/4 of the year they're given to the schools. I mean, the school's paying a portion of their salary, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But we really don't count our school resource officer as part of our patrol. Our sergeants on patrol are typically on duty with their teams, but because our sergeants are mid-level supervisors, the nature of their duties and responsibilities is a little bit different than a normal patrol. For instance, our sergeants are responsible for supervision, observation, and instruction of the officers. They supervise investigations and criminal complaints. They're responsible for direction, detection, collection, and preservation of evidence at crime scenes, and to make sure that any crime scenes we have are processed correctly and adequately. They review it and inspect investigative procedures of our officers. They keep records and make reports of our investigations. They investigate complaints of any officers. They provide coaching and counseling to officers as needed, and recommend any disciplinary recommendations to myself, the chief. They complete annual performance evaluations on officers. And so because of their supervisory responsibilities, this makes, of course, their primary responsibility oversight of criminal investigations, oversight of our patrol officers. And any reduction in staffing for any reason makes our sergeants perform normal patrol functions. And when we do that, we reduce their ability to perform their supervisory, managerial, and leadership functions. And this can have negative effects on our mid-level supervision, both administratively and procedurally. If you're wondering about the 3rd position in our agency, the 3rd sergeant position in our agency, that is an administrative sergeant slot. And that administrative sergeant does not perform typical patrol supervisory functions. So this upcoming hire that we just hired, that we just interviewed for, and given the officer the conditional hire offer, is a backfill position. And hopefully, if all goes well and everyone's healthy, that officer will fill one of our first proposed cover shift or power shift positions, which we'll discuss that, and I'll cover that here in a few slides. Now, one of the main issues with our current staffing is that each team only has 2 officers. So when we have an event, for an example, a vacation request, sick leave, light duty assignment, or hopefully we don't have an incident such as an officer involved shooting or any other critical incidents which remove officers from the street, it reduces the number of officers that we have each shift. And it can potentially leave us with 1 officer, or as we've seen in the past and we're looking at in the future, no officers to cover a shift. So no patrol officers to work a particular shift in the city of Liberty Lake. Now, as I say this, and I mentioned this a second ago, variables such as officer involved shootings and critical incidents are unpredictable, and supervisors have no control over if and when they occur. And with the status of the way things are going right now, I hate to say it's only a matter of time, but we may be due for a critical incident. as I examine our staffing needs now and in the future, I'll use a combination of staffing models to determine our staffing needs. Now, this determination over which staffing model I'll utilize will depend on a mixture of variables, for instance, crime in our community and community needs itself. The 5 staffing models that are commonly used to determine law enforcement agency staffing are crime trends, officers per capita, minimum manning, authorized budgeted levels, and workload-based models. Now, I've done some consulting, again, being a newer chief, and talked to several chiefs in our area, and they wanted me to point out one thing and remember one thing, that after years of academic and professional research, there hasn't been one way that has been determined to be the perfect way to determine manning. So looking at it from these 5 different levels, not just one particular method, gives us an advantage and a better idea of how many officers we need now and in the future. Now, one of the most common models and most well-known models used by law enforcement agencies to determine manning is the per capita model. And in the per capita model, the formula seen on this slide is used to determine how many officers an agency employs per 1,000 citizens. The United States Department of Justice recommends at minimum 1.5 officers per 1,000 citizens. As you look at the slide, you can see here that we, the Liberty Lake Police Department, we have 15 officers, and that includes the new hire that hasn't started with us yet, that was just given the conditional offer, which leaves us at 1.42 officers per 1,000 citizens. Comparably, Airway Heights employs 20 officers, which gives them 1.9 officers per 1,000. And the city of Cheney employs 18 officers, which gives them 1.60 officers per 1,000. And then you can see their population, which was the most current estimate per their police chiefs that I contacted last week of their population. Crime trends is another model. Now, understand that crime trends and workload are 2 different models. However, I combine them in this slide because they both are rooted in the amount of calls an agency responds to. One deals strictly with the amount of calls, and the other one, workload, deals with the amount of work each officer has to, how many calls for service each officer is responsible for in your agency. As seen in the data here from November of 2020 to January of 2021, the calls for service in Liberty Lake are going up. And I know that it's common for calls for service to rise and fall. However, through my experience, and I know Sergeant Morgan is on the line now, and he could probably weigh in on this. The calls for service in Spokane County have been increasing every year. They're not going down. So it is highly reasonable for us to believe that our calls for service will continue to rise, although we will see those dips and ups and downs. But overall, the calls for service will continue to rise. I know in our executive meetings, I've mentioned the increase in property crimes. We're seeing at least one burglary, commercial burglary a night now. At least over the past couple of weeks or a month or so in Liberty Lake. So I don't think that those trends will diminish anytime soon. Minimum manning is another actually really common model now for law enforcement agencies for several reasons, but one of the main reasons is officer safety. And minimum manning is, although I'm not using it in this particular proposal, but it is something that I want to consider in the future. The minimum manning model is an excellent way to address officer safety issues and allow for adequate staffing. Minimum manning basically sets a hard and soft minimum for your agency. For example, through our contract and our policy, which that's where minimum manning is usually set through policy and through contract negotiations. You set a minimum, so you can't go below that minimum without good reason. And if you do go below a certain minimum, you call officers in for overtime. I can tell you after talking to our Cheney chief that this is the direction that he went. I know at the county, coming from the sheriff's office, we had a minimum manning. I know the city has a minimum manning standard as well. So this may be something that we want to visit and talk about a little bit more in the future. And just a little bit more on that. I just wanted, this actually just came out this week and I thought it was pretty interesting because there has been a trend in the past through police bargaining associations and units across the country to push for civil action against law enforcement agencies, city and county and state governments who do not address their manning issues. And when officers are hurt and killed, and inadequate staffing is a variable, again, there's been a push for years for through these police bargaining units for agencies and governments to be held accountable for not addressing the manning needs. And I'll leave that up if you want to write that down. It's actually a good read there. And I can tell you from experience, especially coming from a county agency, I've been there, and I know Sergeant Morgan and I talked about that today. And both of us coming from county agencies at one point in our career have experienced this, and working for a city is no different as well when you have inadequate staffing. So why do we need to increase staffing at the Liberty Lake Police Department? Again, most of that's written in my proposal, but there's two big reasons why. Number one, I want to ensure that the type and amount of police work emanating from our community does not exceed our agency's capacity to deliver the services that our community needs, deserves, and will require in a manner consistent with citizen needs. And to address the officer safety and wellness issues related to inadequate staffing. That's it in a nutshell. That's the why. The estimated cost of hiring an officer I outlined in my written proposal. I know RJ may have some further information, or he does have some further information on that, I believe. And this can be discussed in the question and answer session, hopefully. One of the things I don't think I noted in my written presentation was the possible offset. And this is just an estimate based on communicating with former Chief Brian Asmus regarding how much the Central Valley School District is paying per school resource officer. The two county resource officers at Central Valley and U High, this is the amount that they're paying. So Brian estimates that if they agree and they sign the agreement, this is approximately somewhere in the ballpark of what they're paying for Officer Holthouse when he's over at the school full time. So there should be a little offset in our budget there regarding his salary. Like RJ wanted me to, and I think it's a good idea to just note that. So our possible new organizational structure, on top of our normal patrol shifts, the 5:30 to 5:30 shifts, daytime and night, the backfill officer, hopefully when and if he comes on, again, he's going through his background at this time. So I'm hoping within the next 3 weeks, he will be over to us from Orange County. We'll fill one of the first cover shift positions. If you can remember from my proposal, cover shifts work in conjunction with regularly scheduled shifts during our community's high volume call incident period. So that increases our amount of manning on the street and allows not only for reactive patrol, but also proactive patrol. And the position that I am requesting will hopefully, when everyone's healthy, and well and back to regular duty will fill the second cover shift position. So we will have a cover shift on all sides of the week to assist in that coverage. And that's all I have. And I am available to answer any questions, hopefully, and write down any questions that I can't answer at this time.
Looks like Mayor Pro Tem has his hand up first.
Yeah, Chief, thanks. I appreciate the detail that you've gone into. Could you go back to the screen where we're showing, I think, January, February, and possibly December of
Yes, sir.
total calls and everything?
Yes, sir. And don't hurt me for saying yes, sir. I know you told me not to do that, but that's a habit.
Right, yeah. And why did I tell you that?
Because you're working, your dad, sir, and you're a working man.
That's right. Yeah, there you go. Okay. We're on the same page. My question is looking at November, December, and January. I'm looking at the totals, like 395, and then you look at the amount of calls and stuff. Is there something else that these numbers represent that is not on this?
Yeah, not all of the incidents. When Sergeant Jones, when he gets these together for me, he just kind of puts together, an example of some of the incidents. It may not cover all of the incidents, for instance, DOAs and all of the other things that we attend. So this is just some of the incident. It doesn't these totals. Where am I at? Where's my pointer? I don't want to do the wrong thing here. So there we go. These totals are not like a mean of
Right.
A total of what you see here. There's also additional calls there. So,
Right.
But that's just an example of some of the calls.
Right. Yeah. The other thing is that when I was over last week, one thing we were talking about is looking at the square footage and stuff and realizing as we move forward, I think, as I mentioned you and I reiterate, I mentioned this before, it's critical that we look at what is the square footage of a building we need for our officers, not only now, but at build out. And I think it's most important at build out to plan where we're going to be. And as you and I talked, there's other cities around us that have similar square footage. So when you're putting this information together for us moving forward, I know that's something you're going to take into consideration. That the
yes, and thank you again for coming over and spending that time with us. It was really helpful, and we got some really good feedback and advice from you that'll definitely be beneficial moving forward.
Very good, thank you. That's all I had.
Right. I saw Councilmember Foyer, and then we'll have Councilmember Kurtz.
Thank you, Mayor. My question relates to the school resource officer. The way I understand what's been presented so far, we're looking at an estimated cost of just shy of $95,000. Did I see the school was going to reimburse just shy of $39,000?
And that's just an estimate, and it is that agreement hasn't been signed and hasn't been agreed upon yet with the city. So that's just an estimate. That estimate is based on what the Central Valley School District is paying the county for the 2 deputies. So that they're paying the $38,000 each for the deputy. So it was, multiply that by 2 for the deputy, but that was for each deputy.
Okay, thank you. So I guess to the root of my question then, I guess I don't feel like I've seen or heard of any proposals regarding this position and who's going to pay for them and who's doing what. So can somebody shed a little more light on that agreement?
So I just did check with Katie. It sounds like we will have the agreement in front of us sometime this summer.
And Mayor, I'll add, there's been conversations, very preliminary, and when we get more information, I'd love to bring Superintendent Small over to a council meeting so he can answer all those questions. As far as working out the details and negotiating something, that has not happened yet. And so, Chief, I was wondering, perhaps you and I could approach Central Valley School District and put together a timeline that we could bring back some information to our council. And I think what also might be helpful is to understand what is happening currently at the other high schools. This is new for us, and so I think part of that is learning what the agreement is between Spokane Valley and Central Valley High School as well as U High.
Yeah, definitely. I've been keeping in contact with Brian, and I was over at the school district a couple of weeks ago, communicating with their leadership regarding this. But again, as Katie said, there hasn't been anything updated yet, and I would believe that that would come before the summertime, just from my experience of being a school resource deputy. So hopefully, I'll get that to us quickly.
Yeah, because by the time it gets through our legal, their legal, our council, their school board, we need to make sure we plan for that time. Thanks for your work on that, Chief. So did you have a follow-up, or I've got Andy with mine too?
Yeah, can I follow up with a second question, and I'll be quiet for a while? My other question for you, Chief, is help me understand a little better the process or the policy regarding the police sergeants, the patrol sergeants, in their role in backfilling when somebody's sick or need, whatever reason they're not able to come to work. What's that procedure? Help me understand how often they might fill in for somebody that's not able to come to work.
I can tell you right now, our sergeants, it's often. It is often because, for instance, I think when Pro Tem Kennedy was at our facility a couple of days ago, the only patrol officers you had to answer calls were myself and the sergeant. That we were patrol that day because of illness and injury. So for the patrol sergeants, especially at night with Sergeant Jones, it is almost all the time with vacations and sick leave. Again, the issue with that, there's a lot of issues with that. And I gave you just a few of the sergeants, their primary duties. As a mid-level supervisor, you are responsible for a lot of things. And I'll give you an example. If we have a critical incident, a shooting or some other critical incident, a fatality domestic violence incident, or a near fatality domestic violence incident, our patrol sergeants are tasked with, and mid-level supervisors are tasked with supervising that crime scene. That's making all the necessary calls that they need, any necessary calls for assistance from the county, investigative assistance, and to make sure that all evidence is processed correctly, and that scene is run, is processed correctly and investigated correctly. If a patrol sergeant has to take part in interviewing witnesses and handcuffing people and separating people, and not able to focus on those duties that they're tasked with, per their job. I'm sorry, my telephone was ringing. Their job description, then it opens some holes there, and there's a lot of mistakes that can be made. So when you have a sergeant not able, and that's just an example, and I'm just telling you from my experience as a sergeant assisting patrol, and getting an earful from my supervisors about helping out too much on patrol and why, and having to learn that as a mid-level supervisor, there's certain duties that are super important and really important that you have to stay free for. That is an issue with having our sergeants supplement patrol so much.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Kurtz, you had a question.
I have two. In the slide that we're on right now, it's kind of a follow-up to what Mike was asking. So can you give kind of an idea of what, like, the biggest number of calls for service? Like what do you guys get called out on the most?
Right now, we're seeing a lot of property crimes, a lot of commercial burglaries. For instance, I think there were, I know there was at least one last night. There were two the night before, but a lot of commercial burglaries. And that is the issue with when you talk about property crimes, especially commercial burglaries, is when we have officers responding to calls, say we have one or two officers on, that officer goes to a domestic violence incident or, gets a DUI, then that takes that officer off the street for an hour or 2 or 3 sometimes. And now when you don't have an officer on the street, and even if you have 2 officers, you have one officer take a suspect to jail, another officer start to work on a report or do some other portion of an investigation, you're still taking 2 officers off the street. And, you're taking those guys or gals off of the street for hours, and we don't have anyone for proactive patrol. So now, we have the issue with the property crimes. When we're not visible, we're not able to be out in the community to do proactive patrols, to do our business checks and those types of things. So that's the issue with our staffing now, with just 2 officers on, at night, sometimes 1.
And I appreciate that with the pandemic, I think that we might be seeing an uptick in some of those things just based on the way the world is today.
Well, I know I can tell you that at the beginning, and I wonder what the numbers are. I haven't heard recently, but a couple of months after the pandemic started, property crimes in the county were up 300%.
Yeah.
So
I have one more question, but I don't know if I should wait for the next, if anybody else has a question first.
I don't see any other hands at this time, so we lost, Mayor Pro Tem. Okay, then I'll get back to you.
Yeah, at the end, it'd be fine.
So you're deferring to Councilmember Kurtz?
Yeah, well, yes, Annie said she had another question.
Oh, okay. My other question is, you had the information about Airway Heights and about Cheney, and I wondered what support or resources they have from campus police on campus at Eastern and possibly from the casino. I mean, are there other agencies up there that support, the peacekeeping mission up there or not?
Yes. After talking to Chief Hensley, he said one of the issues with the campus is that they usually have 1 officer on. Okay. Typically. Airway Heights is a good distance from Cheney. So, and I was a West car for a long time in the county, and you all depend on each other out there. I can give you some stories. I won't do that now about working out West by yourself and waiting on someone to get to you and, things being pretty hairy. But when I talked to Chief Hensley, he said the issue with the university police department is that they typically have 1 officer on, and they're responsible for they have their own responsibilities. And sometimes that's the issue with depending on another agency for back. They do have some resources as well that we don't have. Both agencies have 2 detectives, for example. So they do have, being just slightly larger agencies, they do have some resources also that we don't have. Comparing that or paralleling that with our situation with the county butting up against the city of Spokane Valley and unincorporated Spokane County, I can tell you right now that during my last 2 years, at least 2 years as a sergeant in the unincorporated portions of Spokane County, there's no East car at all. They don't have the manning to staff District 9, which is Otis Orchards, north to Trent, over to Millwood, to the state line, and just south of Liberty Lake, Sprague, Liberty Lake, and then over into the valley a little, south of the valley. There's no District 9 car. So we can't, in the past, having worked east, it was great because you could back the Liberty Lake officers if there was 1 officer on. There's no East car at all in the county. It's rare because of their manning situation. Depending on the valley, I can tell you as a valley supervisor, spending a majority of my time in the valley as a sergeant, they're running from call to call to call to call to call to call because they're running with 6 or 7 guys in a city that's 100,000 plus. And there's no time to breathe. So depending on the valley for addition, unless there's a critical incident, they're going to drop what they're doing and come. If an officer is involved in a shooting or an officer's in trouble, everyone in the county, including the city of Spokane, is going to drop what they're doing and start heading this way. But for routine, priority calls, depending on the city of the Valley right now, when the county is trying to hire 40 people before the end of the year. The
Wow.
county is trying to hire 40. I had their training sergeant in my office asking for some advice, and we were kind of bouncing some things off each other about hiring. So they're trying to hire 40 before the end of the year. And so just to get their manning to where it needs to be. So depending on other agencies right now, all the way around is kind of a touchy subject. Like I said, if something really bad happens, everyone in the region's going to come. But, you know, for routine priority calls, you may be alone for a little bit. I have to wait a couple of minutes before someone free can come. And for us, that might be District 10, it might be District 8, it may be District 11 in the county, or it may be whenever a Valley car can become free.
Thank you.
I've got Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy, then Councilmember Dunn.
Actually, I'll wait. I've already had an opportunity. I'll wait until the end. Councilman Dunn hasn't had an opportunity to speak yet. Go to Dan.
Yeah, and I'm gonna pitch for Odin too. He's out there, I think. Chief Simmons, I'm very grateful for the information provided. I think it's informative and very, very well researched. Question, do we currently have a resource officer posted to Selkirk Middle School?
Yes, he's there, but he's not there full time because the school is not paying his, of course, a portion of his salary yet, but he is slotted as the school resource officer. He is there on most days, most of the time, but he understands that when there are patrol calls that need to be answered, he leaves the school. With the students returning to the school little by little, and now more by more, actually, they've been requesting him more. And there has been some issues, a lot of issues at the schools that he has handled that has kept the normal patrol officers free. So I'm grateful for him for that. Actually wearing, doing both things right now.
Oh yeah, the notion though that we don't necessarily have an operating agreement with CVSD on the placement of that resource officer. We don't yet have any agreements on that one?
No, sir, not yet.
Okay, great. I say that, and I think it's an important responsibility that we have in our community. Public safety extends not only to the streets, but also to the community schools. And when we talk to our partner agency, Central Valley School District, insofar as the burden of cost, I'll express my position. I believe that we're not here to have cost recovery, I'll call it, out of the school district for the participation of this officer. I'll refer to the words cost share. And that I would not, for example, expect for this Central Valley School District bear what we think is the burdened overhead FTE cost of that officer, as much as we reach an agreement about where we think we are together in presenting that as a resource. I just think it's super important. And like say, yeah, public safety in our community extends not only to the streets and the businesses and the residences, but also to the schools. I just want to make sure that gets covered. I just would say that based on the evidence and the information that you're presenting here tonight, I support the initiative of seeing that a full-time officer is added to the city's police department. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dunn, if you could do me a favor and take your little hand thing down, because I can't rearrange my video and still. Thank you. So Councilmember Langford, I apologize. You had moved on my screen. Did you have anything to add? No, at this time? Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this is comment back on the resource officer, which I'm sure everybody would agree. It's great that we have some coverage there. This question has come up in the past over the last several years, and it certainly came up again with the recent vote for the support of the Central Valley School District and the rest of them. I was contacted by 2 citizens locally, and they were asking the question that how much that the school district is paying for that resource officer. I didn't know the exact dollar amount, so I said I'll certainly check into that. Both individuals separately were supportive of a resource officer, but also they pointed out, and I think it was a point well taken, that the part of the operating funds that the school gets is for security. So both of them did make a comment feeling that the citizens of Liberty Lake as someone getting double taxed to some degree, but not only are we paying the tax to operate the school and for our kids, but we're also paying for a resource officer. So I certainly support that, but I'm more supportive personally that we have it much better than $38,000. I understand that each officer, Brian has educated me in the past, usually runs the city about $150,000. Roughly by the time we figure their salary benefits, retirement benefits, for a police vehicle, all this runs about that dollar amount. So I think it is important we take into consideration when we're talking to Central Valley that they pay a substantially more than the $38,000 towards this officer, because it does not only benefit the citizens, it benefits our kids and puts our police officers in front of these young minds, and they can see the benefit of having the officer in public safety. Thank you.
I can tell you that, having been in that position for 4 years, the school resource officer position is one of the most pivotal, most important positions you can have in a law enforcement agency. Not only are they a school resource officer, they're a neighborhood resource officer. They're a resource for the surrounding neighborhood as well. And the relationships that those officers develop with the kids is priceless. And they do so much to relieve some of the burden of juvenile investigations, whether it's crimes against persons, property crimes. They're such a resource, and I'll go further than that. They're a resource for the social services system, the mental health system, because they're a direct contact for entities like the Spokane Domestic Violence Coalition, Lutheran Community Services. They're just, I can't even describe how important that position is. And not only that, they are security for the schools. We look at the Liberty school shooting, and the school resource officer there, Ron Nye, was not only a partner of mine when I was a school resource officer, but he was one of my field training officers when I lateraled over here from Great Falls. And just to talk to him about, how different things might have been if he wasn't at the school, and also the janitor as well that stopped it. But to have those resources in your school is very important. So.
Yeah. Well, I think my comments really pointed to that there's an incredible benefit to have them there. I know in this last year at the school when they had a career day where our police officers were there, I volunteered and I was there all day long. And I stood back and talked to the students. I saw how our police officers interacted with the students. And there was a lot of other businesses there where they could talk about career day and stuff. But what I did notice, and I enjoyed it a great deal, because of our officers were so great dealing with the kids, that we really had a lot of kids coming over visiting with us about police officer and career and things of this sort here. So there's no doubt there's a benefit there. It's just a matter of, I think we need to be cognizant of what the true costs are.
Yep.
Mayor, can I comment real quick just on the salary? So Mayor Pro Tem, I don't like to correct, but I just want to make sure I point out the full 150,000 is typically the police officer salary, depending on the benefits. It's about $100,000 a year. The 50,000 on top of that is usually a car, and that's not a carrying cost over and over again. So if we're looking at a 50-50 split or something else, I want to make sure it's not like we're looking for 75,000. If we're looking to truly share an officer, you're probably closer to the $50,000 range.
Oh, I agree. I agree. Yeah, I have no challenge with that.
Okay. So council members Stevers and Langford, I haven't heard from you. I just want to give you another opportunity if you have any questions or comments. Okay, doesn't look like it. So Chief, is your request then to have us look at a possible budget amendment in the future for further discussion and possible approval?
Yes, please.
So go ahead, Councilmember Foyer.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to be as nice as I can about this. I really do.
It's always a vicious beginning.
Softening you up. Watch out. We have a $2.9 million budget for 21. What I can gather is wages and benefits is 1.996 of that budget. The remainder is operating expense, however you want to use it to support your efforts. One of the things that I asked for at at our discussions at the end of 2020 was for each department head to go through their line item and their budget and look at very closely overages and underages, under expenses and over expenses. And as we get into it this year, I'm gonna be a little more insistent on that, simply for the fact that we have a fairly large rollover of excess funds year after year. And I would just like to see us clean up our budget. So it leads me to believe you may already have the funds in your budget, Chief. I don't know. I haven't taken the time to go through it. RJ probably knows better because the last information I have is October of 2020, which is a month and a half or 2.5 months shy of comparison to what was budgeted. So I would just ask if you could look at that for us, and maybe we don't need to make a budget amendment.
I know some of the parts of that cost, such as uniforms, et cetera. I believe we can utilize the money from this year's budget, to purchase some of those things. The overall cost, I don't know. I didn't make last year's budget, so and I would just just for future reference, one of the things that I would like to caution all council members, we can't predict, and I mentioned this before, it is difficult and almost impossible to predict what variables are going to arise that are going to call for the increase in our manning. Those are out of our, we have nothing, we can't predict, and we have nothing to do with that. The crime trends, et cetera. So just for future reference, just keep that in mind, that some of those variables, we have no control over.
So to clarify on Councilmember Foyer, on your comment, you're in favor of the chief proposing adding another body to his department, but you'd like to see if there's savings within the budget that's already there. So there still would need to be a budget amendment to add the body because we're adding FTE, but you want to try to make it a budget neutral if possible. Okay.
Yes, that's what I understand the request to be. Okay. All right. Well, Chief, do you have anything else you want to add before we take a recess until 7?
No, not unless anyone has any other questions.
Looks like all hands are, oh, there we go, Councilmember Kurtz.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say, I think that one of the things that I think I'm excited about is that you are trying to be proactive and think through the current need, but also people's time off, and I think public officer safety. And so I do support Phil's ask for figuring out a way to see if there's a way to do that within the means that we already have. But I do appreciate the presentation and trying to make it so that the people that are assigned to do the work are able to do the work that they're assigned to and not covering for everybody else. So thank you for taking the time to present this.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I'm hearing no others. I guess we will take a recess till 7 o'clock when we'll start our regular meeting. About ready to start. I'm trying to get Councilmember Dunn's video back up to the top here so I can see him. All right, Councilmember Dunn, if I have trouble seeing you with your hand up until I get you moved, just jump in, okay?
No sweat.
Thanks. It's not letting me jump from one screen to another here. Okay. We are at 7 o'clock. Sounds like I'm on. All right, welcome to our February 16th, 2021 council meeting, consistent with Governor Inslee's Order 20-28.15, dated January 19th, 2021. All public meetings continue to be held remotely. We are following the directions of that order, and this meeting is being held remotely. I'd like to go over a few of the logistics so that we can have a productive meeting. On this agenda are routine and necessary actions for our council to consider. We will provide 2 opportunities for the public to provide comments. City staff physically attending the meeting in the council chambers with me this evening are City Administrator Katie Allen and IT Technician Todd Henderson. Todd will be the manager for this evening's Zoom meeting. Anybody wanting to make comments, please send him a chat. The chat will only be going to him if he is administering the meeting. I would like to take a roll call of the City Council and remind you that remind you all that we will do roll call voting for the remainder of the meeting. At this time, I will call your name. Please let me know if you're participating. Mayor Pro Tem Mike Kennedy.
Present.
Councilmember Foyer.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Severs.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Dunn.
Hey, good evening, everybody.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Present.
And Councilmember Langford.
Present.
Okay. All right. City staff also attending remotely are City Clerk Ann Swenson, Finance Director R.J. Stevenson, Police Chief Damon Simmons, Operations and Maintenance Director Jen Camp, Planning Engineering Building Services Director Lisa Key, City Engineer Ben Schmidt, Interim Municipal Library Director Jandy Humble, HR Manager Heidi Workman, and City Attorney Sean Bouts. As I mentioned earlier, there are 2 opportunities for public comments. When those times come, I will acknowledge public participation. There is a 3-minute limit during the regular comment. For the record, please let us know your name and if you are City Lake resident or not. Finally, anyone who is not speaking, please remain muted until it is time for you to speak. The first item on the agenda is the invocation.
Mayor, could you please mention 8.5 in our rules of
Well,
procedure?
when we get to public comments.
Okay, very
my
good,
plan.
thank you.
Okay, invocation. Councilmember Pro Tem Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. Please join me if you will. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for being with us on a daily basis. We certainly thank you for being with us this evening. We pray that you help all of the council members and those who are participating in our meeting, that we look at all the subjects with common sense, not just with emotion, and we make the right decisions for the benefit of all the citizens of Liberty Lake. In your son's name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Might stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
flag
States of
of the
America
United States of
and to
America,
the,
and to the republic
I'm getting a
for which it
reverb.
stands,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I apologize, everybody. I was getting other voices in my ear. Okay, so we are now to call to order, so call meeting to order, and we will do a roll call once more, just to confirm. Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy,
Present.
Councilmember Foyer, Councilmember Severs,
Howdy.
okay, Councilmember Dunn,
And still enjoying the snow.
Yeah.
Councilmember Langford, and I see Councilmember Foyer there. Okay, all right, now, Mayor Pro Tem, we're on to agenda approval.
Thank you, Mayor. For the council's consideration, we have a couple of changes possibly here. One would be Councilman Langford, I believe you have something you'd like to change?
yes. Mayor, may I be recognized?
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Langford.
Mayor Pro Tem, I would like the council to approve an executive session this evening to discuss the procedures for item 9.3 and to remove item 9.3 from the agenda this evening until we've had a chance to talk about process, not the case itself.
I would second that motion.
Move and second it. All in favor of that amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Discussion?
Discussion, okay. And any opposed? Okay, so it looks like we've got our executive session added and removal of 9.3, and I believe there was another adjustment. Councilmember Dunn.
I don't think we voted or approved
Right.
or discussed.
Well, I was taking each amendment as presented, not as a whole.
Well, there was a motion and a second, and I'd requested a discussion.
Okay, go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay. Discussion is that was placed on the agenda. I asked that to be placed on the agenda so we could move forward with some sort of discussion with this particular item. So I fully support Councilman Langford asking this to be brought to executive session. Thank you.
Okay. All in favor of adding the executive session and removing item 9.3, we'll take a revote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. So we have the addition of that executive session at number 17 and removal of 9.3, and Councilmember Dunn. I believe you had a request.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I'd like to, on the agenda item 13, move the first read ordinance of 269B to the meeting of March 2nd.
I second that motion.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion on removing first read ordinance 269B? All in favor of removing, say aye.
Specifically, Madam Mayor, sorry, the action was to move to March 2nd.
Okay, so move to March 2nd. Thank you. So I'll restate the motion. All in favor of moving first read ordinance 269B to March 2nd, say aye, please.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, we'll move that item to March 2nd. All right, now we have the revised agenda, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, I see if there were no other changes, I make a motion that we approve the agenda as changed, written and changed.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, and all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, we are on to citizen comments. So before we embark on citizen comments, I will remind everybody, if you want to speak, send a chat to Todd Henderson through the chat function. Also, comments are limited to 3 minutes. And it was brought to our attention by the city attorney, an item in our council rules of procedure, number 8.5, where it says written communications. Interested parties or their authorized representatives may address the council by written communication in regard to any general matter concerning the city. The written communication may be submitted by direct mail or by addressing the communication to the city clerk, who will distribute copies to the council members. Communication will be entered into the record if requested by the party. So, so we have been managing the written comments improperly for the current rules of procedure. So starting tonight, we'll be honoring those rules. I do know there's a workshop coming up in the future for the council to reconsider and amend some of the council rules. So if this needs to be looked at, discussed, and possibly changed in the future, we can do so. So with that, Ann, I believe we do have, did you have any written comments to note for the record?
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. On February 11th, 2021, we did receive a written comment from Liberty Lake citizen Tom Salberg, and it was to address a concerted campaign recently to denigrate Shane Brickner.
Were there any others?
There were no other written comments received.
Okay. And so I know we have Holly Woodruff from the Liberty Lake Municipal Friends of the Liberty Lake Municipal Library who wants to speak. We have Colin Tracy from the Spokane Chamber. And do we have anybody else, Todd? Not at this time. Okay, Holly Woodruff, you're up.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My Zoom seems to be working this time. Thank you, Mayor, City Council, staff, and everyone in attendance. I'm Holly Woodruff. I'm a Liberty Lake resident, and I'm president of the Friends of the Liberty Lake Municipal Library. Just wanted to let you know our annual Valentine Basket Silent Auction ended on February 10th, and I'm excited to share that the Friends raised $1,136 from the auction, the most ever for this event. On behalf of the Friends, I want to thank the donors of the 17 baskets, everyone who bid on the baskets, and we had a total of 144 bids, which was awesome. Everyone who won a basket, and those who chose to give a cash donation rather than bid on a basket. The funds raised by the Friends support the programs and events at the Liberty Lake Library. It was fun to greet the winners of the baskets when we met in the library parking lot for basket pickup. The winners had many wonderful things to say about the quality of our library and its staff and programs. I hope City Council will keep the library at the forefront of the capital improvements discussions I know you'll have soon. No matter how you vote on the budget amendment ordinance pertaining to a capital fund for the library, please keep in mind how important our library is to so many people, those who work hard to support the library and those who participate in the programs, attend events when we can have them again, or make use of library resources. Our library truly is the heart of our community. Thank you very much.
Congratulations to the Friends of the Library. Great work in a time like this. All right, next we have Colin Tracy from the Greater Spokane Valley Chamber of Commerce.
Hi, thank you, Mayor Kaminskis and City Council. Again, my name is Colin Tracy. I'm the Strategic Initiatives Manager for the Greater Spokane Valley Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to give you guys, provide a little update about what we've been working on this new year. My position works a lot with the government, so I have been busy during the legislative session. We have taken part in the Joint Chamber Virtual Olympia fly-in. Obviously, we can't fly to Olympia, so we've helped GSI set up the different representatives that have joined that fly-in. We moderated the one that was done last Wednesday with the 4th District with Representative McCaslin and Senator Padden. We also convene our Government Action Committee meeting, and last meeting we had Representative McCaslin, Senator Holy from the 6th District, and Representative Graham also from the 6th District, and to give our members and our businesses a chance to let their representatives know what they've been doing, how COVID has affected them, like many businesses have, or like it has to many businesses. A few things that we've really focused on this session has been transportation, and making sure that the legislature keeps the promises that they made in the Connecting Washington package to maintain that funding. We've been keeping our eye on the various transportation packages that have been introduced or have been floated around. Unemployment insurance for businesses is a big one right now. Rates and the level at which you're at, we're set to go up, and they've taken some measures to pull that back, which we supported, but that was just a first step of many. So those are just a few things that we're working on that I wanted to let you guys know about. The other thing is we are trying to maintain our programming level as much as possible. So we will be doing our gala March 12th next month at 9 a.m. And the theme is Stories of Resilience. So we're asking our members to nominate businesses that they know about or themselves to describe how they've been resilient through this COVID, how they've adapted. And that's free for everyone to attend. You can just sign up on our website for community members, businesses. You don't have to be a member, but we'd just love to have you join us. And that's it.
Right. Good timing there, Colin. Thanks for joining us.
The time that
All right, thank you. And Colin, thank you to you, GSI, and the Greater Spokane Valley Chamber of Commerce. I'll touch a little bit later on our attendance at that fly-in event. So thanks for joining us today. All right, we are at announcements, proclamations, special presentations. I don't believe we have any tonight. So we will move on to reports. City Council reports. Is there anything that any of the members would like to report on from the last 2 weeks? Okay, Councilmember Dunn.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just observed tomorrow I've been asked to join Chief Brian Collins in an informal discussion to be recorded of Spokane Valley Fire's response or how they've dealt with the pandemic now 1 year into it. I've been equipped with a short collection of talking points from Katie, highlights of the city's response, I'd say in complement to that. But I'm honored to be able to join Chief Collins in preparing information to help people understand how public agencies have been dealing now we're coming up on a year with the situation we are all enduring. So thanks.
Great, thanks for taking that on, Dan. I really appreciate it. Any other council members? Mayor Pro Tem, did you want to take a stab at any of the plethora of meetings we went to this week?
No, I think it was informative. It was very long in some instances. That's my report. I know that you and I discussed this, and you're going to give a more in-depth.
Yeah, well, and I'm not going to get too in-depth because I sent out my report to the council Monday morning. I decided to take Sunday evening off of writing for a change. So just some general things. I know sidewalks are becoming more and more popular. That will be an update a little bit later with regards to where we are in that. We've talked a little bit about how to manage the volume and possibility of maybe needing to go to contract some of that work out in the future. So you may hear more about that later. The Government Action Committee that Colin touched on, just a lot of meetings this week with regards to Government Action Committee, the AWC City Action Days, which coincided at the same time many times as the GSI Valley Chamber fly-in events. So I think at one point, Katie, Mike, and I split 3 meetings because they were all at the same time. So a lot of really good, interesting information. We did talk about, there was a really good AWC City Action Day session on advocacy, and that session is recorded. I don't know if it's just available to us who attended, but I'll work on seeing if anybody is interested in listening to it. It's an hour. I'll see what we can do about getting access to that. Is that engaging our lobbyists, engaging our representatives in a more useful fashion to try to move our agenda along. The governor's address, he feels our pain. I just wanted to pass on that message. We also heard from some city champions. There's some representatives that get an award each year for championing their city's causes. Hot topics, statewide TIF programs. I've talked a lot about transportation and lobbyists, and then kind of rounded out the week with some SRTC meetings. Nice thing, a couple really good points there. They currently have their interim director in position, and they are looking to post the permanent replacement director position will be posted mid-March, so we'll see how quickly that goes. And in the interlocal agreement committee meeting that we had on Friday, really interesting discussion about everybody having a seat at the table, not rotating positions for, like, we have one person representing small cities. So that's been a really interesting discussion over the last couple months, so I'll keep you posted on where that goes. It'd be great to have a permanent seat at that table. I think that's all for me right now. Anybody from the Library Board of Trustees?
Yes, Madam Mayor, it's Tim Olson. I'm here representing the trustees.
Hi, Tim.
Hi there. I just want to give a couple quick updates. I just want to let you know that the trustees are working with the city HR department to review the applications for the library director position. We'll have interviews and calls all next week. I will be probably reaching out to a few city council members trying to get your input so that we can bring you and the mayor a qualified applicant to meet your expectations. So look for a quick email from me so we can spend some time together. And we plan to have recommendations out to the HR department here in the next probably 10 days to 2 weeks. Just side note also, we had a good going away party for Jocelyn last week. I happened to get a chance to take a look at the children's room at the library with the new bookshelves that were donated by the Friends and the funds that were donated. It looks fantastic. That room is now huge. The books are really displayed nicely, so that's pretty exciting. I had not had a chance to see that with the current restrictions. The library is preparing to open on a limited basis under phase 2 with some more flexibility. I'm not going to get to the details of that too much because that's what the experts come in for, and then let them go ahead and talk about that at some point. And then just on a final note, I wanted to read something that the library received from a family member in Liberty Lake here. You know, this is a tough time for a lot of us in the city and the country and around the world. And I thought we need to have a little bit of levity sometimes to kind of think through this kind of stuff. But here's a quick note. I'll keep the family's name secret so I can protect their identity. But it starts off saying, during this period of hunkering down at home, our family spends extra long chunk of each day immersed in books. The world feels uncontrollably tumultuous, and I can truly appreciate the role reading plays in making our home feel like a haven. This past year, my 5-year-old learned how to read. His confidence skyrocketed, and he is thriving academically. My 3-year-old struggles with speech delay, and I credit books with the significant strides he has made in expressing himself. The library has elevated my ability to homeschool, expand my kids' interests and vocabularies, and provided us with laughter and inspiration that kept us from going stir crazy. Thank you to all the employees who made it possible for us to check out so many books. We deeply appreciate the impact you've had on our community. With that, I conclude my comments from the trustees.
Thank you for sharing, Tim. Appreciate it. Do we have anybody from the Planning Commission?
Madam Mayor, Chairman
Yes.
Seiler was going to be presenting tonight, but I do not see him on the call. He did want to let City Council know that the Planning Commission will be holding 2 public hearings next month. One on the landscape ordinance, which the Planning Commission has been working on for well over a year, and amendments to the landscape ordinance. And the other is amendments to the sign code to allow for blade signs, canopy signs, and marquee signs, much more pedestrian oriented signage. I did want to just mention that the Planning Commission meeting has been rescheduled from March 10th to March 24th. And as I said, we will be having hearings. Thank you.
Thank you very much for stepping in, Lisa. I appreciate it. City Administrator report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Good evening. It's always nice to go last because a lot of things on my list have already been covered. On that note, everyone knows that we Spokane County moved into phase 2 recently. And this morning, the mayor and I and a bunch of other city folks were on a conference call with the health district. And we asked very specifically, what does phase 2 mean to government facilities as well as public meetings? And this afternoon, we did get an email back from the health district that basically said that they were going to be evaluating what government facilities and public meetings need to do in order to comply with the phased openings. And they have turned it over to their Environmental Public Health Division. And so we're going to be working very closely with them on how we can reopen our city council meetings and also reopen our city hall. And so at this time, we're still kind of on the same train that we were on last week. However, we are watching very closely and trying to be, I will say, assertive in what we can do and do well. The other thing I wanted to differentiate is our library. They are in coordination with all the other libraries that have identified protocols for limited openings. And so Jocelyn did a very good job in lining out a plan. I read it. It's very, very, very detailed. And they have a plan to reopen the library. However, they have to train their staff and we have to make some modifications to their operations. Having said that, we don't have a date certain yet. I guarantee you we will open when they are ready to open, but they do have a staff training on Thursday, February 25th to train their staff on all the new protocols. So with that, that's kind of the update on where we are with phase 2 as it relates to the city. I'm going to move on now to number 2, which is a tour of city facilities. I wanted to give this an exciting name to entice some of you to attend, so I called it Behind the Scenes. Councilmember Kurtz asked for this, and so we agreed on February 22nd at 10 a.m. It starts out with City Hall. I apologize, that's a typo. We only have one City Hall. But on our site, we have a garage. We also have a little house. So this is going to be the complete look at our City Hall facility and our campus. Then we go to parks, and we will include Town Square, Pavilion, Rocky Hill, and Orchard Park. And we will show you our storage areas, etc. A lot of the other facilities that we have that are kind of unique to each and every park. And then also the police department and our library and our chief and Dandy Humble will be there to kind of show you behind the work area of what goes on in those facilities. And then finally wrap up with Trailhead. My guess is it's going to be about a 2-hour, and if you want to come to City Hall, just let us know. I believe Councilmember Kurtz will be on this tour, so we have room for 2 more people. If you're interested, please join us. If this time doesn't work for you, let me know and we will schedule a different time that will work for you. If we could know by Friday, that would be fantastic.
Kate, if I might jump in, I really encourage everybody to take advantage of this, either on this date or another one, because I know we do have our upcoming workshop on capital facilities plans. And I know I'll be there for one of them. There's things that have changed over the years that, I need to have my memory refreshed on as well. And I think it's a really good that everybody have a refresher before we go into that retreat.
And then along those lines, Mayor, I forgot to mention the Public Works Yard. So on our list of facilities to visit will also be the Public Works Yard. Thank you. So a quick update on the 23-acre land transaction. I know we've all been wanting this to move along quickly, and our attorney and the Water and Sewer District's attorney are working together. The Sewer and Water District Board did request title insurance, and so we had to make some modifications to the purchase and sale agreement to include that. I do want to let council know we did have title insurance when we purchased the property in 2016. However, the conveyance or the transfer of that title insurance over to the district is something that the attorneys are working on. And so it's moving along. We're just not quite there yet. Library director recruitment has pretty much been covered. Heidi Workman, our HR director, is in daily conversation with the trustees, going through the selection process and identifying the top candidates. So we're anxious to hear back from them on the recruitment. Mayor, you went to a groundbreaking this afternoon.
Yeah.
I was going to turn it over to
I forgot to share my
you to
new
talk about
bling.
the attendance was limited. They only allowed 16 people. So you want to take a gander at our mayor? She has a hard hat.
So Lisa Key and I attended the groundbreaking and 65th anniversary celebration at the new Western Cat location over at the end of Harvest Parkway and on what is going to be an extension of Cataldo. So like Katie said, it was a small gathering. They were only allowed 2 people to come from City Hall. Great project. I know there were some bumps along the way, getting some things negotiated with the valley, but it's going to be a great project for both Western Cat and the city, and, their employees are excited about it. Their facilities apparently are outdated, and everybody at their company is really excited about this to happen. They're looking about 18 months for the project at this point.
And Mayor, I don't want to embarrass Lisa, but you shared with me the compliments that the entire team paid to.
Yeah.
It was the key in facilitating the evaluation and the forward progress on that project.
Yeah, they were all extremely happy with Lisa, and I expect that knowing her to continue. So thank you, Lisa, for all your hard work on this and your team as well.
We did have a question come up related to the Liberty Boys Academy. And Lisa did a bunch of research on this. I think I emailed it to you. I think I sent so many emails today. If I didn't email it to you, let me know. But Ann, can you put up the one-page document? So Lisa did some research. There's a lot of information on this page. It's going through the review process. As you all know, it's physically located in Spokane County, south of our city limits. There is a lot of questions that are coming up regarding noise, activity level, traffic, etc. And so there will be, during the course of the project, an evaluation of impact, and the hearing examiner then would identify the impacts that need to be mitigated. I'm not a planner. Lisa, did you want to add anything?
Just that, that the project will sooner or later trigger a SEPA review, and the city will have the opportunity to review and comment on potential impacts if and when that occurs. And so that's really our opportunity, and they'll have to look at things like traffic, et cetera. So anyhow, long story short is that we will have an opportunity at some point in the future. When I spoke to when I emailed back and forth the county, as of right now, they have not yet received the application for the change in use, but the change in use, it's currently a single family residence, a very large single family residence, but a single family residence nonetheless. And they are requesting a change in use for that facility as for boarding and for the school operations to start with. And that's going to actually really require some significant infrastructure improvements, which in and of themselves may trigger SEPA. They have a more extensive master plan on their website, but again, I think that that's their vision of where they want to go, not necessarily where they are today. And as I said, that they did their pre-development with the county back in 2019, and they have not yet filed an application, although the property has changed hands. I'm available for any questions that people may have.
No, at least I will add though, because this started to blow up on social media in December, and it came up again within the last month. So instead of reading through all the speculation, I did pick up the phone. I got a hold of Luke, and I cannot pronounce his last name very well, so I will refrain from that. I just asked him some questions, again, knowing this is in the county, knowing it will go through the proper processes, but he did offer that if the council would like him to answer any questions, he'd be more than happy to come to a council meeting. So I know we're kind of watching this closely. A lot of the neighbors down there are watching it even more closely. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Going back to my report, the last thing I had was a follow-up from February 2nd, just to confirm the council capital facilities retreat. So this will be a meeting specific just to our capital facilities. And we were tossing around two different dates, April 13th and 27th. I could not remember which day we decided. So I'm bringing it back to ask you one more time. April 27th is obviously later in the month, and likely we could have I'm keeping my fingers crossed, an in-person retreat for that event. But the 13th might work also. So just some feedback on that would be appreciated.
I think at one point we had talked about maybe moving it into March, but we never really decided. I think maybe if you get your updated matrix out with the other workshops and this, I think that we can get everybody to look at everything in one totality and see how it all shakes out.
Okay. So I owe you some information back. If someone has their hand
Yeah,
up.
Councilmember Dunn has his hand up.
Okay.
Just that voice, I'll make either one of these two dates. Personally, I'm thinking the later of the two would be better chances of in person. So.
And then finally,
Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy. Sorry, Kate.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, when this was first brought up, my recommendation was to see if we could do it in March. For the simple reason is that time is of the essence when it comes to capital facilities. If we were to shoot for March and it doesn't work out and needs to postpone, we can always go into April. But I would like to see us shoot for March. Sooner the better on this, please. Thank you.
Okay, we can read that. I think that's where we maybe had it penciled in. Okay, Councilmember Foyer.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I recall the discussion being in March as well, because we have a 2-week spread between council meetings. I'm looking at the calendar now. March, the scheduled meeting is the 16th, and we don't have another one till the 6th of April. So that's, I think, why we were leaning towards March.
Right.
I really appreciate that. Why don't I pencil in March 23rd? Is that, that's the Tuesday after the 16th. And then like Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy said, if that is not a date that we can meet in person, we can revisit it at that time. So, and I'm going to make a note so we don't forget, March 23rd would be a retreat. I'm just making that comment. If that date works okay for you guys, we can go from there.
Looks like we don't have any objection at this point.
Okay.
Oh, Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy, go ahead.
Yeah, just for clarification, we seem to always shoot for the Tuesdays. Is there any objection for council that we look at maybe a Wednesday or a Thursday sometimes? Because every time we shoot for Tuesdays, it seems like we're always 2 weeks to 3 or 4 weeks out on some of these items. Just for council's consideration.
Sure. Councilmember Kurtz.
I have no objection to a different day of the week. I think it just kind of depends on which one it is. So I can
Right.
get it.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, I don't know if you were on that today, Katie, but I've answered a couple doodle polls where organizations are asking for feedback from many members on possible times and dates for meetings. Maybe that's something we can take a look at for this one.
Oh,
And
that would be
everybody
good.
we can consolidate those answers really quickly, and it's really easy to fill out.
Yep.
It'll show different dates, different times, and then we'll see who's available when.
Okay, by the end of the week, we will send you all a doodle poll. Very good. I appreciate that suggestion. And then finally, I'm working on the whole matrix, but before I go any further, I just wanted to let you know the roads out there are very slick. We did just send out a notification that we will start plowing, continue to plow, I should say, our arterials. I know I ran out and got something to eat and then came back, and just a word to the wise, if you have to go out, be careful and drive safely. Mayor, that concludes my report.
I know they're not on here, but I did see Chief Collins in the audience. I didn't know if he had anything from the Spokane Valley Fire to report.
I don't tonight. Thank you.
Okay, and I also see former chief, now director of Central Valley Security. Chief, Brian, I don't know your whole title, but I didn't know if you had anything to add from your standpoint from the school district.
No, I don't, and I'm just enjoying the meeting tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. All right, so I guess that concludes discussions. So up for discussion first is the interview process for City Council position 7 candidates. Just to reiterate, we had 17 applicants, 2 of which were not eligible due to not being registered voters in Liberty Lake. So that brings us down to 15. And we did find out today that Katie and I were just on the phone with Sean, our attorney, that there can be no whittling down of the list prior to interviews. So Katie, you had more the longer part of the discussion with Sean, unless Sean, do you want to weigh in on what we can and can't do with regards to the list as big as it is?
To make sure our terminology is consistent, I'll jump in. So what Sean Belcher, our city attorney, let me know is in our own rules and procedures, we've identified that all applicants will be interviewed. And so with that, Mayor Pro Tem, that's pretty consistent with the conversation I had with you earlier today. So nothing's changed other than, I guess, just the point is you cannot, I'll use the term screen, you cannot shortlist them just based on their application. They all need an interview of sorts. So Mayor Pro Tem, we were on the correct path as we were discussing, had the conversation earlier.
Right.
Okay. So I'm not quite sure who wants to lead the workshop on the procedure. I'll defer to Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy.
Oh, I just love to jump into the middle of this. What to recommend? I'd like to throw this thought out for the consideration of the council. Now that we're in stage 2, and we don't really know how that's going to affect us with public meetings. I know that Katie has been talking to the health department and stuff, that Katie, you could probably touch on this also, that they need to come out and inspect the building. There's a lot of things they need to look at if we're going to be able to get in there and have some meetings. With that in mind, I would propose for us to consider this is that, we have a lot of applicants to look at. We were talking about having interviews on the 23rd. If there's a possibility, we could still do with the 23rd to have some interviews and then see if it could be extended to possibly March 2nd, because we have 90 days to make this decision, and that would put us into April. I'm not recommending we go into April, but the benefit would be this, because we have so many applicants, that if we were to do on, let's say, the 23rd, some preliminary and all the interviews, and then if we whittle it down to wherever we're going to be, if we could actually be in the council and be able to be in the same room when we have these interviews with some of these individuals, that would be huge for us. Because just looking at the applications and then seeing somebody on a Zoom is really difficult to I think, make a logical decision. So I just want to throw that out for us to reconsider or consider changing the dates when we do this.
So Mayor Pro Tem, it sounds like you were saying do initial interviews with all the candidates on the 23rd, and then based on the results of that, come back on the 2nd and do second interviews with a select however many number. Is that what you were asking?
I'm just throwing that out as a possibility. There's also the possibility if you wanted to extend it to the 2nd and then do interviews on the 16th. I'm just saying that those are those possibilities. The further we could stretch it out, we're not going to hurt ourselves, but it does give us the stronger benefit to be able to get back into the council chambers. That's the only reason why I'm bringing this up for consideration. Thank you.
Sure. Councilmember Foyer, then Councilmember Severs.
Well, thank you, Mayor. So we have 15 applicants. What kind of a time frame would we expect per interview? 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour?
Councilmember Foyer, just something to consider. If you wanted to conduct the interviews for all 15, my suggestion would be to give them each a certain amount of time, 4 to 5 minutes, to share with the council their qualifications and their interest and their background. And then from there, you can identify, I will say, the top group of applicants. And then, as the Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, and Mike, if I didn't have this right, correct me, then bring back the finalists, I'll say, for an in-depth interview, which could take 10 minutes per applicant or depending on what you want, 10 to 15 minutes per applicant.
So
I think 10 to 15 minutes per applicant with 15 applicants would be very time consuming.
3.5 hours. So I thought I heard earlier you said that the requirement is we interview all of them.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so, talking with our city attorney, he indicated if you gave all of the applicants the same amount of time to introduce themselves, then that would qualify as an interview.
Thank you for clarifying what is the definition of an interview. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll come back.
Sure. We have Councilmember Severs next.
So I had the exact same question, but I'll just do a follow-on. do we think, I guess I'm asking for council discussion on this. Do we think that a 5-minute introduction interview suffices anything in addition to what they've already done with their applications to us? Or should we split this over 2-hour meetings where we're trying to do 15 minutes?
Well, I know I'll just throw in my quick opinion real quick. I know, having gone through so many interviews with other applicants before, we can have somebody who looks great on paper who interviews poorly, and or the opposite. So I think even if it's 5 minutes, it's very telling. And Councilmember Dunn, I think you had your hand up. And then
just that I support, I'll call it the down select to a limited count of participants. I'll recognize the interaction the action we observe as an introduction, that we ask each of the 15 applicants for an introduction. And then following that, we work to a process, we'll call it a down select, the count of which I'd like some discussion that then are subject to a traditional interview interactivity in the following meeting.
thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. When we recall back where we've had this situation in the past, the most we ever had was 9. And Phil, you'll remember that because you were involved at that. But what we've done, we've always had a series of like 5 questions that we would ask. And I think we allowed, I want to say 15 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. And we split those 5 questions or 4 questions, whatever it was, in that. So if we were to allow 5 minutes for them to say something, we're not going to be asking questions. So I think that's what we have to decide. Are we going to ask questions of these individuals, or is it just going to be, we'll give them 5 minutes to tell us who they are, we look at the application and move on from there?
Thank you. Real quick, Councilmember Langford has his hand up real quick.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. I would like to voice my support for a formal introduction by the candidates. And at that time, we would be able to get a good enough read on whether or not they should move forward to a final selection segment. So I like what Dan said and what Kennedy has also discussed.
Thank you. Katie had a quick comment, then I'll get you, Councilmember Severs.
And I don't like to be Debbie Downer, but we have a logistical challenge that I just want to make the council aware of. All of the interviews have to happen in public, and your vote has to happen in public, and the discussion of the candidates need to happen in public. The challenge that we have logistically with so many is if we were to split it into 2 meetings, and it has to be in public, there's an equity issue that if the group was in the first group, they would see the second group, excuse me, if you were in the second group, you would have seen the interviews from the first group because it has to be a public meeting. So we're trying to work through the logistics of what's required by law, but also the complexities of having this 2 different interviews on one day. So I apologize for making this complicated, but it is complicated. Thank you.
Councilmember Severs, you were next.
Katie, that's not complicated. That's great, great feedback. So no, I think I'm hearing multiple council members say 5-minute introductions and try to do it on the 23rd. I want to circle back to Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy's point that in person would sure be nice if we can do that for that particular type of meeting. Is that something we think we could accommodate?
I think so. So let me try this on for size, Councilmember Severs. If we invited the 15 people into the into City Hall, and they came into the city council chambers one at a time, or they did it by Zoom, I think we could accommodate that. We could do it either by Zoom, and the council could be here, is what I'm thinking, or the members could, or excuse me, the applicants could come into the council chambers one at a time.
With a computer set up.
With a computer set up.
And cleaned in between.
Because it has to be a public meeting, and the public can only attend remotely.
Gotcha. Thanks. Mayor Pro Tem, and then we'll get back to you, Councilmember.
Yes, another question, consideration for the council. Would it make sense for us to look at the interviews on the 23rd, where we allow them 5 minutes to tell us about them, From there, we can decide what number we want to go down to. And then if it's 5, 6, or whatever it's going to be, then whenever the next meeting is, then we would be in a position to ask the questions because we would be dealing with less individuals.
Councilmember Stevers.
2 comments. One, my preference would be that the candidates would come in one at a time in person into council chambers while we were all present also. But Mayor Pro Tem, to your question, I would like for us to talk about process for that night. Do we think that we should be shooting for one number that night, or how does we go about? Is it okay for us to wait until after we interview folks to then decide what number we're going to go down to and decide process that night, or should we talk about process tonight?
Yeah, I see Councilmember Dunn gesturing. I think tonight is probably a more appropriate time to discuss the process around that as well. Again,
I tend to agree.
It's unfortunate that we've had so many people, but I think it's only fair for the candidates to know going into this what the process is going to be. Councilmember Foyer.
Just a question, actually. So I'm clear. We have to do an interview, however long it is, with all of the candidates in one session, correct?
We don't have to, but that's based on what Katie said about equity, that's the right thing to do.
I'm struggling, if you can come up with a way to interview them in 2 different sessions in a public meeting and not have a competitive advantage to the second group.
Right.
So I'm hearing, so the 5-minute introductory has to happen in one session to be equitable for everybody.
Right.
I think so.
Agreed.
I would agree. So that's part 1 of it. My second question is, you said that we have to take a vote or make a decision in a public meeting, which I fully understand. That doesn't have to happen at that same session. It can wait for another meeting, correct?
That is correct.
And if we give every candidate 5 minutes, and you know it's going to take a couple minutes just to shuffle in and out, you're probably looking at a 2-hour-long meeting. So I would be in favor of just do the 5-minute introductory has been suggested next Tuesday, starting at 6 o'clock, done by 8. Home in time to watch Dr. Phil or whatever it is you do.
Councilmember Kurt.
I like the ideas that we're tossing around here. I think for me, the 5 minutes doesn't have to be in the city council chambers, especially if we're talking about still doing some version of Zoom and not knowing, where we're headed just yet with what we can do in person and everything. The actual, if we're getting down to say, I'm just throwing out a number like 5 people, that may be a time to be actually in person. But if it's still going to be something where the candidates are coming in by Zoom, I'm just questioning whether we need to actually be there in person if the candidates are still going to be in there by Zoom, if that makes sense. I think if we're going to be in person, let's be in person with everybody. But if it's still some sort of version of somebody on a camera, then I would be in favor of still being on a camera as well.
Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, logistics on this, I think back to what Hugh was saying or referring to. If we do the interview on the 23rd and we allow 5 minutes and then 5 minutes shuffling back and forth, we're going to go through easily 10 minutes there. But I think what we would have to do is on the 23rd, narrow it down to how many we want to go forward on, because we can't leave that decision to the next meeting because we'd have to have all 15 people back again. So I think that. Go ahead. No, that's good.
I was just saying to your point, again, just based on experience, and I'm sure most of you have the same experience. If you all are interviewing everybody, doing the introduction that night, everybody's going to be much more fresh in their mind to make the decision that same night as to who makes that cut, whatever that number is. And I would encourage you guys to try to figure out that number tonight during workshop and maybe what the process is going to be of getting to that number.
Can I say one more thing? I think one thing we have to,
Councilmember Langford got his hand up real quick. Then
Okay,
we'll get
that's
back to you,
fine.
Mayor.
that's fine.
Oh, no, there you go. You're back, but we can't hear you.
There, sorry about that.
There you go. Okay.
Mayor, I'm trying to recall how we can set a pre-number or prefigured number on how many people we're going to interview when we haven't even heard them yet. So I would much prefer not setting a dedicated number that we're trying to reach, but instead let the interviews drive that number, and we'll have a much more realistic idea of how many people we'll bring back.
Sure, that's up to you. It's just a suggestion. Thanks, I appreciate that point of view. Mayor Pro Tem.
I believe, I understand what you're saying, and I support that, but I think at the end of the meeting on the 23rd, we have to know what this number is before we go to the next meeting. And the other thing that I would caution all of us on is, because if we're going to be stretch this out over 2 meetings, that I think the council all of us has to put ourselves in the position not to allow ourselves to have interviews with any of these candidates between the 23rd and the next time. Not verbally, not in person, not any recommendations or letters or even recommendations from neighbors. I think that's to be fair.
Good point.
Can I move forward on the date? Are we committed to the 23rd? My question is, what would be our next? Would the next meeting be this, not the 2nd, would it be the 9th of March?
Yeah, and then you're cutting it, you're getting closer. So I know, can we leave your question open for just a second, Mayor Pro Tem? I think
Yes.
Councilmember Dunn has his hand up, and then Councilmember Kurtz.
Absolutely.
I yield to Annie. Go for it.
Oh, thank you. So my question was just kind of along what Mike was saying, and a question that he asked earlier is, if we did the meeting on the 23rd, could we have a meeting on the 24th to get this taken care of? And I'm just throwing it out there. I hear what you're saying, Councilmember Kennedy or Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy, about that time in between, which I think is a valid concern. It doesn't have to be the 23rd for me, but I'm just having the decision-making process and the freshness of the candidates, so we actually, make a decision and don't forget what they said or whatnot, makes some sense to me.
All right, go ahead, Councilmember Dunn.
So I'm actually really good with that suggestion to move closer together the dates related to the actions. What I begin in suggestion is for the mechanics of actually interacting with people. 5 in count, in my opinion, represents what I would think is reasonable in what we have as a context of a council meeting. And so to assert that, got to get from 15 to 5 and then 5 down to 1. And I would, ask for suggestions of how to get from 15 down to 5.
Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy, and I've got a quick comment when you're done.
Sure. Yeah, with Annie, Councilman Kurtz, at 24th would be fine with me. The only reason I bring out any stretching of the dates is to give us a better opportunity to be able to get back into our council chambers. To me, I think it's huge. I can narrow it down to 5. I'm comfortable with that number on a Zoom. But I think when we get down to the hard task, we're going to be asking somebody 5 different questions or whatever the question is going to be. I would love to be in the room where I can see this individual. I can look him in the eye and know exactly what I'm looking at. Because body language also in an interview is huge. So that's the only reason that I was throwing out, stretching it into March. But if whatever the majority goes along with, I'm fine.
Councilmember Stevers. You're on mute.
sorry. I'm also in favor of both the 23rd and 24th, and I guess I wonder if we want to try to make the 24th a somewhat short meeting to spend the 23rd strictly doing 5-minute interviews, 24th trying to boil it down to 5, and then our council meeting the following week on the 2nd inside of our meeting do nominations and appointments there of the 5 and do discussion within that public meeting.
Yeah.
Councilmember Foyer?
Yeah, I have a conflict on the 24th. Not that you need to make your decision based around me. If it takes 2 hours to interview 15 candidates, we're pretty accustomed to a 3-hour meeting. Can we not just bust it out on the 23rd afterwards?
Works for me.
Narrow it down to the 5.
So just make sure I'm understanding what you were saying, Councilman Foyer, to do the interviews and narrow it down on the 23rd, but then still have the follow-up meeting for the rest.
Correct.
Okay. Councilmember Curtis?
I think I was saying, I must not have been clear in what I was saying. So on the 23rd, we would have the 5-minute interviews, and at the end, we would narrow it down to the 5. And on the 24th, we would interview the 5.
It sounds like Councilmember Foyer isn't available on the 24th. Could we?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
that it sounds like there was a difference in interpretation of what I was suggesting. I don't suggest like doing the interviews one day, deciding the next day, and then waiting. So, yeah.
I think we're on the same page now, it sounds
Okay.
like. Councilmember Stevens?
Does the 25th work?
That's what I was just gonna ask. Does anybody have a conflict
You're
on
out.
the 25th?
No.
I do.
When are you back?
Is this Mexico?
No. It's my wife's birthday. That's important stuff now.
It is.
26th?
No,
22nd?
the following
So
week.
real quick, so if I may jump in real quick, what does our proposed agenda look like on the 2nd? If we decide to try to make it part of our meeting?
And do you have a glimpse into March 2nd? I know.
Yes, actually, our agenda looks really light so far on the 2nd, and we only have a few action items, which would be the approval of the council minutes, the vouchers, possibly awarding a bid for a generator for the library and police department, as well as an agreement with Greater Spokane Incorporated on the scope of their economic development.
Okay, Councilmember Wingford?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can't we do this on the 22nd Monday and the final on the 23rd?
Very good point. So what's everybody's calendars look like for both of those evenings, Monday the 22nd and Tuesday the 23rd? I see a thumbs up from Councilmember Kurtz, you good on both those days? We have consensus, it looks like. So it sounds like we will do initial introduction type interviews on the 23rd. What time would you guys like to start? 6 o'clock?
22nd?
22nd.
22nd.
On the 22nd, I'm sorry, Monday the 22nd, 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
Okay, hearing none, so let's do that. We'll have to figure out the logistics in between, so we'll take that action item. Go ahead, Councilmember Foyer.
Just a question. I thought I heard, maybe it was Annie say, we were going to do this first round by way of Zoom, or are we going to do it in person?
That's what we need to figure out based
Okay.
on our logistics and our technology.
What I need to find out is, can we meet in our facility with all the council members around the dais and then bring in one candidate at a time for a 5-minute introduction of their qualifications? And if we can't do that, then my suggestion is they do their 5-minute introduction by Zoom. Tonight, I don't know that I can say with certainty that we can meet in person.
But we will get together and we'll pull together what we can as quickly as we can. And then we would follow up on the 23rd, I'm assuming 6 o'clock as well, for the follow-up interviews. Now, traditionally in the past, we've basically put names in a hat or numbers in a hat to choose the order. Is anybody opposed to doing that again? Okay. And then I guess I'd like to hear some, oh, go ahead, Councilmember Severs, before I move on to my next question.
Only as you say that, I'm just thinking if they've got to come in one at a time, I hate for somebody sitting out in their car for 2 hours in the council parking lot, not knowing the order.
I said, Councilor Severs, we will bring them into the building and then retrieve them one at a time to enter the council chamber.
We'll have them scattered. But I don't think there's anything wrong with using a random number generator. Unless you guys are opposed to that, there's plenty of random number generators out there that we can just Google, and we can maybe do the selection ahead of time in case some people can't make it at 6. Because I know some people have work issues, so.
I would prefer that method unless anybody's opposed to it, that if you know that your interview slot's probably going to be 7:45, I hate for you to show up at 6 p.m.
Yeah. Okay.
Just wait till people find it. So.
Okay, so we'll pick the names in random order prior to that. Maybe we can even do that by the end of this week, and then so we can get that done. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, I'm very comfortable with the 22nd and 23rd, but I would also have the council take into consideration that if we get closer and it looks like the 22nd, we won't be able to be in our chambers, but it might happen we could be in the chambers the following week of the 1st, that we would be flexible enough to change that second interview so we could be in the chambers. Hugh, wasn't that kind of what you were referring to? It'd be beneficial to be in the chambers?
I agree with you, Mike.
Okay, thank you. So I just hope that we'd be open minded that we can change that if we get into the chambers.
All right, sounds good. So we got 6 o'clock on the 22nd, 6 o'clock on the 23rd, penciled in for now. We'll do the random number generator this week so we can get the order of which these will happen in. So I guess my next question is, do you guys have any discussion on the process by which you might narrow this down? My thought is, everybody rank the candidates, 1 to 15, and then compare those. I'm not quite sure how you want to go about that. I'm sure there's multiple ways to handle it.
Mayor, can I interject something?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Generally, what we've done in the past is that once the interviews have occurred and the information's been obtained, the council members would adjourn to executive session to discuss qualifications. And then once they were done, they would return to the chambers or to the meeting and then nominate candidates through a motion second for voting. So that's generally how the process has gone in the past. Certainly the council can do something different, but just as how it's unfolded in the past, that's the way it's went.
Okay, so can you walk me through nomination? Let's for now, just for discussion purposes, let's say we're narrowing to 5. Can you walk us through how that nomination process might work? So we're used to only dealing with 1 or 2.
Right. I mean, from the standpoint of the process of an initial, I'll call my words, screening interview, it isn't necessarily specific to that. But if the council wanted to handle it the same way, any council member could nominate a candidate. And then if that candidate received a second, then the council would vote in the entirety as advancing them as a candidate for a more in-depth interview at a later date. But certainly if they wanted to have a different format for that initial process, that could occur as well. But just of the selection of the council member at the end, that's the process that we have used. So if they wanted to still use the same process, they certainly could, or that initial one, they could do something else. I'm just offering it up as that's how the process has been for the selection of a council member when they got it down to one individual.
I've got Councilmember Kurtz first and then Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy.
So if I'm hearing that right, then potentially we each could nominate a different candidate or not. And if it was seconded and the council agreed to proceed with their nomination, the most candidates we could have that move on would be 6. Is that?
There's nothing that precludes you from nominating more than one person. So theoretically, you could have more than that.
Is it something that we could potentially agree on as a process that we would each only nominate one person?
Sure.
As a matter of procedure and, okay.
I think the point here, Mayor and Council, is that how you want to use that first interview process and determine a lower number to do the subsequent interviews is certainly up to you. I'm just offering up what the process has been in the past relative to actually selecting a council member.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy.
I'm very supportive of what Sean is saying. I think it's important that how we've done it in the past, we do it in the future. The consistency, I think, is very important that we do this. Thank you.
So to Annie's, go ahead, Councilmember Dunn.
So just to paraphrase that, that a council member would make a nomination of one of the 15 statements that have been heard. That nomination, we'll call it seconded and voted, is to now include that candidate in a subsequent action. The important moment is we're not selecting that person as designated appointee. We're adding that person now to that, I called it down select or subset for consideration. Is that a pretty good paraphrase of that?
That's what it sounded like.
I would say that's correct, yes.
Okay. I value that as procedure.
So Councilmember Kurtz had commented, possibly one nomination per council member. Is that something you want to entertain or not? Anybody? How about is anybody opposed to that? Councilmember Follier.
Yeah, I don't know if we should restrict ourselves that way. I mean, I understand the reasons why, but I just wouldn't want to limit discussion. How about that? Or emotion, or have anybody walk away from the meeting feeling like they didn't get their say. Thank you.
Councilmember Kurtz.
And I appreciate what Phil is saying too. I think that being able to nominate more than one person does make some sense to me, because then the council votes on whether they move forward or not. I just want to also avoid us getting into a situation where we end up nominating all 15 of them. So we got to figure out some way to filter a little bit. So keep talking, everybody. We'll come up with something.
Councilmember Dunn, you had your hand up.
Just to the objective of discussion, the action of a council member nominating one of the 15 candidates would happen immediately following an executive session. And specifically in that executive session, there's any amount of discussion amongst council members about the statements that we've just heard.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And Councilmember Severs.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Twice in one night. Awesome. I think directly following that executive session, we could nominate a round of candidates. And if the list turns out being more than 5, we've whittled it down, and we could then renominate based on that list until we get to 5 if we agree that 5 is our number that night. It's relatively similar to the appointment process.
Councilmember Langford, you've been fairly quiet. Is there anything you want to add?
No.
Okay. All right. So, okay, Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy.
One thing we want to keep in mind is this, that we need to put a number on it. And I'm just gonna throw out 5. It can be 6 or anything like that. What will more than likely happen is this. We might have it to where we have 2 council members who want to nominate the same person. So we could easily not end up with 6. We could end up with 4. It could be that we have 2 council members say, I nominate so-and-so, and that other council member is not going to have to be forced to nominate, bring another name into it.
We could always say, you know, we will nominate no more than X.
Right.
I think that would be a good way to handle that. So if that's agreeable to everybody, I guess we, what we think, what you guys think X might be, I think that would at least cap it, and knowing that you don't necessarily need to come out of it with that number. Councilmember Follier.
So we all have equitable voice. Maybe that number should be 6.
No more than 6?
No more than 6.
Any opposition to that? Okay, hearing none. So let me just get another quick summary of where we are, because we've had a lot of discussion tonight. So again, introduction interviews on the 22nd at 6, going into executive session, coming out and nominating no more than 6 to move on to the next process, which is tentatively scheduled for the next day on Tuesday, the 23rd at 6. Does that sound accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Just a clarifying statement. That first round in which we are hearing from each one of the candidates, 15 and count, I'd like to use the word statement in reference, in that we're listening to them, but it's not an interaction. I mean, we're not posing questions. So if when reference, we could use the word statement in that regard, I think would be helpful.
Good point. Thank you for that. Councilmember, Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy, and then I've got Katie.
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, I would like to also interject again that we keep an open mind about the 23rd, that if it looks like we are going to be able to get back into the building, that we'll be willing to change that date.
Well, and we'll also obviously have to make some sort of, we'll have to find out from the candidates as well. So we'll work on that, getting in touch with the candidates and making sure there's no major conflicts with that either. Okay. Mayor, let me get Katie first, Mayor Pro Tem, and I'll come back to you.
So just for purposes of clarity, we city staff, myself and probably our city clerk, will assign a random number to all of the applicants with interviews, I would say 7 minutes apart, because they each get 5 minutes and we will use a timer. The question that I have is, what do you want our instructions to the candidates to be? Give me, some suggestions. Could be, tell us a little bit about yourself and your interest in the position, or what direction do you want us to give to the candidates for the 5 minutes?
Okay, I had 2 go up at once. So Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy, you had your hand up for 4. Do you want to wait until you come back to that?
Yeah, let somebody else speak first.
All right, go ahead, Councilmember Kurtz and then Councilmember Dunn.
I'd like to know something about them that they did not put in their resume or their materials. I'd also like to know a little bit about their want and desire to be on the city council, and then maybe something along the lines of where they see the city going in the next 4 years. Something, those are a couple ideas I have. Not all of them, but.
Councilmember Dunn.
Just to characterize that as a 5-minute statement, specifically, we're gonna have to time it.
Yes, right. And I think if we just give them a framework of a couple of things that Councilmember Kirk suggested, we've all interviewed for jobs, and this is basically a job interview. So bring your best, right? Okay. So, is there any, Mayor Pro Tem, did you have anything else to add, or anybody else before we move on to the agenda?
Well, because we're bringing up a lot of questions and comments and stuff, I think it's important to realize we're going to ask 15 people to clear their calendar for the 22nd. We have to be open to, there might be somebody that can say, I just can't make it on the 22nd. If that's the case, I guess they're not going to get an interview.
Yeah, well, and I think we need to have a little flexibility too in the order. We'll do the random numbers, but if we can provide any flexibility, that I think that's the fair thing to do.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Follier.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank the council for looking out for me later in the week, so I'm not in the doghouse with my wife. I really appreciate that.
You could pay everybody in chocolate.
Thank you.
All right, if nobody else has anything on this topic, we can move on to update to ordinance number 234.
I do have one more, sorry, Chris, just to clarify.
Go
What
ahead.
I'd like to quickly, because we got this opportunity tonight, is to review then what that next meeting and the subsequent, I'd say, vote for an appointed member looks like. And I say this because of procedure, it is sometimes a little bit confusing.
Yeah.
I'm going to recount our action. We're now looking at, and I'll pick a number, 5 names. These names will need to be established in a voting order. I don't yet see how we're going to establish that. But then we will subsequently take a vote in series for each of those names. And the very first name to reach a majority of the council's vote is then the appointed member. Does that sound about right?
Oh, for after we downsize the list for the final
Correct.
candidate. Okay, yeah, good point. We didn't get to that piece of it. That's how it has worked in the past. So
Mayor, from the standpoint of Councilmember Dunn, yes, that would be the process because that's how the rules set it up. So it would be 5 or 6, whatever number it is, or 4, whatever number the council decides as far as nominate, to go through the more in-depth interview. Then those individuals, once they're done, you would recess, determine their qualifications as far as which person you would think would be a potential council member. You'd come back out of the executive session and go through the nomination process again with a second voting, and then the individual, the nominations or the voting would occur in relation to how the nominations were made. So the first nominated person, second nominated person, there's no more, there's just 2. You take the first nominated person and vote on them. If they were to get 4 of the 6 council members, they would be appointed the new council member, and you wouldn't even get to the second person.
Okay.
Great.
Appreciate the clarification.
Thanks for bringing that up. Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy.
Thanks for everybody's patience, but on leaving this, here's what I want to walk away understanding. On the 22nd, we're going to interview 5 minutes, whatever it's going to be, of all 15 individuals. Then we will decide if there's going to be 5 or 6, whatever it's going to be, and those individuals will be brought back on the 23rd for a more in-depth interview.
Correct.
Very good. Thank you.
Councilmember Curtis.
As far as the questions in the interview process for the 23rd, how and when will we establish those questions?
Go ahead, Councilmember Kurtz. Ann sent you a list of questions that we've used in the past. So my suggestion is if you have other questions that you'd like to be considered, that you forward those to Ann, and I will ask Ann Swenson to resend those questions to you. I think we sent them out several weeks ago, so I will ask her to resend them to you. And then if you want to make any modifications, Sean, can we do that in executive session on the night before? Review the questions.
From the standpoint of, yeah, there's no requirement with regard to the questions, other than the same questions are asked of each candidate.
So we will send you out the questions we've used in the past, and then in executive session, the night before the interview, we will get your feedback on what, if any, changes you want to make.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So going once, going twice, we're moving on to our next workshop discussion. The update to ordinance number 234, Casitas Code of Ethics, section 1-10-3. You know, Heidi, did you want to walk through the change that was proposed after our discussion at the last meeting? We don't hear you.
Yeah, Mayor, I can probably help out.
Okay.
If Heidi, step in if I'm not getting this correct. Basically, what the red line ordinance would say for the council's consideration is, if you want to change ordinance 234 to identify immediate family for purposes of the code of ethics for the city council as a relative that is a relative and lives in your home, then you would vote to amend the ordinance that we currently have.
So the red line was provided in the packet.
In the agenda bill
Yeah.
and also in the packet.
Yes. So it would read going forward if when we get to that point, but in case, I didn't know if you guys want to discuss it further. So the proposed new language would be, for purpose of this action, immediate family means the public official or employee, spouse, registered domestic partner, child, parent, brother and sister, mother and father-in-law, son and daughter-in-law, aunt and uncle, grandparents, grandchildren, step-relatives, domestic partner, relatives in one of these relationships, or other relatives, and who lives in the employee's home.
Mayor, can I interject?
Yes, sir.
I need to clarify one thing from what's on the agenda bill versus what's in the actual amendment. At the very end where it says with regard to the living section, it's public official or employee. The reason for that, it just got omitted in the agenda bill, but the section in the municipal code would also have public official. And the reason for that is to make sure that it applies both, excuse me, in the ordinance and in the personnel manual, and specifically with the ordinance the way it writes right now, that the issue was in subsection 6 where it talked about a city council member. We also want to make it applicable to a city council member and that relative living in the home with them. So just for that clarification.
Thank you. Yeah, so the agenda bill is not quite accurate, but what is in the proposed change is accurate. So it's page 4 of the updated ordinance under Exhibit A, right behind the agenda bill. So thank you for pointing that out, Sean. All right, so so we have a couple hands. I did not see who came up first, so I will start with Councilmember Langford.
Thank you. Is there any reason that this won't include the mayor?
Wouldn't think so. That would be public official, correct?
Just checking because we make a lot of fuss about the council. Secondly, Sean, do you have a second?
Sure, yep.
How can our municipal code or our ordinance here supersede the right for somebody to run for office?
I'm not sure I understand your questions.
It's pretty simple. How does this supersede the right of somebody to run for office just because a relative who happens to live in their house is also a city employee?
Well, I don't think this would preclude a city council member, for someone running for, with this change, I don't think it precludes somebody from running for city council. And that's why the change, because there was a conflict between this and the personnel manual relative to how it unfolded.
Yeah, I understand. I'm saying that if they do live in the household, how can you preclude somebody from running?
Well, the preclusion comes that the council has passed an ordinance. I mean, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. That's the council decision, but how it comes through is by way of passing the ordinance.
I understand that, but you can't pass an ordinance that supersedes federal law. And state law as well says you have to be, what, a certain age, live in the area, okay? And that's it. So now what we're saying is we're defining
the council is just placing stricter requirements, but not with regard to the nepotism policy. The requirement, as Katie alluded to, with regard to being a registered voter, resident of the community, is very limited. relative to what those requirements are.
John, can I help out a little bit? Councilmember Langford, I don't think you're precluded from running for office if you pass this ordinance. The challenge comes after you're elected, then your relative who lives in your home, Sean, this is where I need your help. There's a concern that they could still be employed by the city. I don't know if they're grandfathered in. I don't know that answer, but passing this ordinance does not preclude anybody from running for office. The impact would be if they're elected and they have a relative that's an employee.
Correct.
Living with.
Okay, Councilmember Kurtz and then Councilmember Foyer.
The question that I had was specific to the last piece, and it says who lives in the public official or employee's home. I think it would be better if it just says if they live in the same home instead of like someone living in somebody's home, because I think then you're like silent on the reverse, if that makes sense.
So what?
So in-
I mean, you could certainly do that. I mean, I know Heidi was trying to keep the language consistent with the personnel manual, and obviously she may be able to speak to it specifically, but I know that's what she was trying to do, you know, with regard to that language. But I'm not opposed to that.
Sean, this is Heidi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So yes, per the last council meeting, we further defined why there was a difference in just and certain members that were listed in the personnel manual versus the council code of ethics. And then we, at that point, had decided to just change and who lives. But upon talking to Sean and sending him my review, he suggested that we do add public official just to really, I guess, point out the difference in it being a public official.
And I agree with that. I think it's more the who lives in whose home piece. Because if I'm an employee of the city, this is saying that I can't live in my husband, who's a city council member's house, but he could live in mine. Does that make sense? I probably shouldn't have used my husband as an example, but it's saying that the person can't live in the public employee's home. But if I go live someplace else because I'm a public official and they're my family and they work for the city, that's okay.
Right.
Does that make sense? That it's like it precludes one but not the other. And we don't want them living in the same home is the gist of it.
Would it read better if it was and who lives in the same home as the public official or employee?
Yes, that's where I'm trying to go. Yeah.
Heidi and Sean?
Yeah.
I don't have any objection to that.
Okay. Any objection to making that slight adjustment? And it'll come, this will have to be made more official when we get to the ordinance later in the agenda. But the proposed change would be, or to the second to last line, or other relative and who lives in the same home. Write this down. As the public official or employee, period. Okay. All right, I know I saw some other hands up, but I lost track. I think, Phil, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you. So I guess I'm a little confused by some of the statements regarding this topic. The way I read the ordinance, as I go to the very top, it says, in order to prevent conflicts of interest, the city limits employment of immediate family as defined in the 6 paragraphs below it. One or in any or all of the following circumstances, right? So as I read through 1 through 6, 1 through 5 pertains basically to employees that work for the city that may be from the same household. Paragraph 6 specifically calls out the city council member. And that's the only place it calls out the city council member, at where an immediate family member is a member of the city council. And right below it, it says for the purpose of this section, immediate family means, and so on and so on. So the way I read this, and maybe I'm wrong, but the way I read this, if I'm on the city council and my son wants to work for the city, he can't, because he's an immediate family of a city council. Correct?
You cut out at the very end.
Is that correct?
I would say the answer, Phil, is yes, that is correct. That way it's worded now, that is correct. Or way the change would be is correct. Right now, there isn't the component of living with someone, a council member right now in the current ordinance, which is why we changed it to be consistent with what the personnel policy was. You can certainly change it altogether, but the way it was passed originally was an immediate family member as that is defined. And so the last council meeting was, no, we don't want to do that. We'll make it where it's an immediate family member who lives with the council member. And subsection 6 that you're talking about is the main issue why we wanted to add that additional language to have the residents be in the home or the employee in the home to avoid the situation for a council member or a future council member, whatever it may be, to be able to still have an employee work there but may not reside in the home.
Okay, I don't read it that
If I
way.
may, well, I was to say, if I may interject both to Councilmember Langford's previous point and Councilmember Foyer to yours, what is it, should we change in section 6, city council to match the new change, to have where it says city council, have it read public official, then it's consistent with the wording.
That was going to be my request. So
the way this is,
so the mayor, the change that we're talking about in section 110.3 is what will change in the ordinance from what it reads right now.
But what I was asking, and I think some of what Councilmember Langford was alluding to earlier on something is, you know, we referenced in section 6, city council and not public official. So technically this would not include the mayor's position, but it should. So if we change city council in section 6 to public official, that would expand that definition of who it affects. So I think that's the intent. Councilmember Foyer.
the way I read this ordinance, again, I just want to restate it. Okay, using a public official, whether it's a mayor or a council member, the way this reads right now, if my son wanted to work for the city, he could not. And what we're proposing to add, where it says, and who lives in the public official employee's home, means everything above it, meaning my son or my uncle or my cousin Bob. But if I have my buddy Bob from high school who lives with me, who is not any of the above, he can't work for the city either, is how this is worded. Is that correct?
I'm not reading it that way, Sean.
No, I'm not. I think your buddy could certainly work for the city.
If he lives in my home, if he lives in my home, according to what we're adding, he cannot.
He's not a
relative. He has to be a daughter-in-law, sister-in-law, father-in-law.
And live with you. And your son can, if he does not live with you, if your son doesn't live with you, he can work for the city.
That's my point, Mayor. It doesn't say that. It says if anybody's immediate family of a public official, then it's a conflict of interest.
Well, that's the reason we're
Your
making
buddy's
this
not
change.
immediate family.
Also, it also has to fit the condition of that relative living in your home. For instance, you know, my son lives at home. He cannot work for the city. My son, 5 years from now, has moved out, married, living, you know, in Spokane. He could work for the city because he does not live with me anymore.
But that's not
what
what
we're trying to accomplish.
That's not what the ordinance says. It says immediate family is anybody that you just identified that is an immediate family member of a council member.
But the addition, it's the condition of and who lives in the home, any of those preceding descriptions, if they live in your home. And again, I gotta defer to Sean on the wording, but that was the intent. And that's why it was changed to have the additional condition of and living in the home.
If we can go back, I think, and Heidi can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was our understanding from the prior meeting is that we wanted it to be consistent with the personnel manual language and add that if any of those identified family members were living in the home, then that would preclude them from working from the city. If a city council member had a son, for example, and did not live with them, then they could continue to work for the city. And so we drafted the language to put it in that form. Now, if you wanted it some other way, we can certainly do that. But I think our understanding was make it consistent with the personnel manual and make it with an immediate family member has to live with an employee or public official.
I believe that was the intent, yes.
So if there's some other direction, we can certainly change that, but that was our understanding.
Councilmember Foyer, and then Severs.
A question. As this ordinance stands today, the way I read it, anybody that is an immediate family member of a public official, according to this ordinance, cannot work for the city. Is that right or wrong?
As it stands today, without the changes that we're talking about.
That is correct, Phil, yes.
Well, this is only a 5-year-old ordinance. I wasn't in the discussion when it was produced. There must have been a reason for the previous council in 2016 to put this language in here, okay? And I would like to really kind of know why. I think I have my own interpretations of why, but this is pretty straightforward, pretty direct, it really limits who can work for the city if you're a public official. So
what I can say from having been there 5 years ago, if we had somebody in HR helping us keep these things consistent, and had we considered all the plethora of different living situations, we probably would not have had it read the way it did. Anybody else who was around, feel free to correct me. Councilmember Severs, and then Councilmember Dunn.
Yeah, I was around. And Madam Mayor, I'd agree with what you just said, that this coming to our attention regarding the option to add a variable in here to loosen up this code just a little bit and say somebody has to be living in your house, and if that specific relative lives in your house, it's more of a conflict of interest, we feel. That was a exciting thing to add in here to me. But I also wanted to point out the way I'm reading this ordinance is, and I'm gonna key in on one word, that's the word and Councilmember Foyer, maybe this is where you and I maybe are reading this a little bit different. So, but I'm reading it that they have to be specifically one of those spelled out relatives, and they have to live in the public official's home in order for the proposed amended ordinance to ring true. So that's where your buddy Bob is not one of those spelled out relatives. Therefore, they're not. And means both, and therefore your buddy Bob could work for the city.
So maybe a better word would be if instead of and.
I think and's, well, I'll direct my comments to the mayor, but Madam Mayor, I think that it reads correctly that they have to be that specific relationship and they have to live in the home is how this is being amended. I think that was the intention per our last conversation.
Yeah, that's the intent, and
So
given, obviously we defer to Sean, but that's that covers.
Yes, that's
that.
correct.
Those two criteria have to ring true.
That is correct. If you didn't hear me, yes.
Yes, thanks, Sean. Hey, Councilmember Dunn, did you still have a comment?
I'm content with the wording and the position of the ordinance. I've asked Todd to show page 99 of the packet agenda with the relevant wording that's in discussion. I just had an observation, specifically paragraph 6 of 110.3. Todd, if you can throw that on the screen.
No, he doesn't have it.
Can you throw it on the screen, Todd?
Page 99, I'm looking at a printed copy. Councilmember Dunn, you said 99?
The packet as was distributed from the city's website.
Okay. We're working on it.
I think, Madam Mayor, you brought out that that paragraph 6 seems to draw attention directly to member of city council, where perhaps more appropriate wording would be the word public official as adopted in the concluding paragraph. But I think to show that visibly would be a little more compelling.
Sure. I can scan it and email it to you, Todd.
Well, if everybody's got access to their packet, it's page 99 in your electronic package.
Well, excuse me for interrupting, but Dan, you're referring to 110.3 in nepotism, correct?
Correct.
Yes. It's page 3 on the agenda.
Well, the actual wording in the ordinance is on page, that Councilmember Dunn pointed out, is on page 99 of the packet.
Well, I have a copy of what I printed off from there in page 3, 110.3 nepotism starts off in order to prevent conflict of interest.
Thanks, Todd.
And understood, it's on here. It's page 99 of the electronic package, Councilmember, Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy. That's what we were trying to point out.
Yeah, no, you're good, man. You got the little PDF's awesome.
I can't.
Scroll down.
Yeah, scroll to 6, and so we can see the entire, well, it's getting too big.
Yep.
Right.
Up a little bit more.
There you go.
There you go. Hold right there, man.
Scroll down.
So yeah, my suggestion would be
There you
for
go.
the
Too
two
big.
placements of the words city council and city council member, that'd be superseded with the word public official as it had been applied in the paragraph below.
Right.
Yep. So we can take note of that, Councilmember Dunn, and when the ordinance is moved and seconded, somebody can propose that amendment along with the revised wording that we talked about with regards to the same home as the public official or employee. All right, Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess the challenge I'm having with this is that we're sitting here and all of us have different opinions and different interpretations and how we can put the, and, or something like that to change this. If this was incorrect when it was first put together, why not just eliminate it completely? It's been my understanding that why we have this, or the main purpose is, so if a council member who doesn't have any control over any employees anyway, but if their son works or daughter works for the city and got fired by one of the other supervisors, the council member could make life miserable for that individual. That's the example I've been given, but that's no different than my son or daughter who works for the city and gets fired, and that's supervisor, another supervisor who's the mother or father, creates havoc for that individual. This seems like a lot of work that we've put into this, where it should have been just eliminated. Eliminate this.
Councilmember Steve. Sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I'm through. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Severs.
To be frank, Mike, Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy, I agree 100% with you. I opposed this in 2016, and I'll put this on public record that my opinion is that this was a culture issue within our city that dates into the past, that I hope is being fixed going forward. And by culture issue, what I mean is city council has no supervisory capacity over any of our employees. And the idea that that if one of my buddies works for the city, or if a family member of mine works for the city, that Hugh's going to be able to go and determine the fate of.
I can't have interruptions. This is my part.
I'm sorry, I'm hearing somebody talking. It's making it tough to chat. So, anyways, I believe that this is a culture issue from the past, and frankly, I'd be in full support of just removing it altogether, for the sheer fact that I would hope that we could move forward, teeing up director level positions with the reality that if they have a poor employee that they need to terminate, it's because the employee needed to be terminated, and it should not be the director's fault. There's process and procedures that go on there. And I don't care if it's my friend or my family member or any random person. I think they're due respect to go through a process through that termination, also a process through just employee review and evaluation for, let's turn it from negative termination to positive promotions and those sorts of things. And I read this and say, if there's a council member that's going and harassing a director level person, that council member needs to be dealt with somehow. But I don't think we should be precluding potentially excellent employees out there just because they happen to be family members of council members. So anyway, I'll put it that way, that I'm in favor of how this is written. But frankly, I've not been in favor of this since it came about in 2016. So I like the idea that we're loosening the rules right now, though.
Okay, Councilmember Kurt.
Just so I'm clear, are you guys suggesting taking out the paragraph below section 6 or the whole nepotism clause?
The whole clause.
With that in mind, like section 6, people living together, I could go either way on that. I think, we were trying to fine tune the intent of where we were headed with that. But I do think there is value in having a nepotism clause about, I'm fine with the first 5, but, and getting rid of the, for the purposes of the immediate, that immediate family piece if we need to. But I guess I haven't thought about removing the whole nepotism clause. I think that could be a challenge in the future.
Councilmember Follier.
Thank you, Mayor. I think there's value in the immediate family definition, and I think there's value in paragraphs 1 through 5 when it comes to family members working for the city. I think that maybe where the hangup is when in how that definition of immediate family plays into the public official section of this paragraph 6. So maybe leave it as it is, and we add a paragraph 7 and strike paragraph 6 that talks about the city council and gear it towards the relationship between the council member and an employee. Does that make sense? Because the immediate family, the purpose of this section, the immediate family definition applies to items 1 through 5. And I can see value there because you don't want family members working in the same area for the city, one having supervisory roles over the other. I understand that. That makes total sense. The only thing that I see where there's it's the connection between the council member and the employee. That's the only problem I see with that section of the ordinance.
I think I saw Councilmember Seaver's hands go up too, and then Councilmember Dunn. Go ahead, Councilmember Severs.
I think those are fair comments that because council members do not supervise employees in any capacity, that is really from 6 and beyond where the conflict or where the issue with this ordinance arises. So perhaps there is a way to scratch that, but I guess I'd be concerned if we're then throw up, or are we just trying to take city council out of this altogether, but then also add other types of relationships that are not immediate family members, my best buddy can't come, or the mayor's best buddy can't come work for the city. Is that,
Don't have any.
did I hear that being implied?
Okay, I think Councilmember Dunn, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I speak in support of retaining section 110.3 with the changes that we've described here tonight. And I'll refer to the appearance of an implied action. I think that having some definition in place for what can or cannot occur will preclude the appearance of something that we don't have. We all, I believe, expect or want for public officials to act in the best, I'd say, and the strongest of ethical terms, but that creating I'd say, a defined set of rules will preclude, the appearance of something that we don't or would not want to happen. So I don't support removing this section. I'm good with the changes that we've got on the table tonight. Specifically with respect to the comparison to the employee manual for the city. So, thanks.
Thank you. There's no more discussion on this. This will come up later in the meeting under ordinances. So, no objections. We will move on in the agenda to the consent agenda. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Consent agenda 10A. Make a motion to approve February 2nd, 2021 City Council minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any opposed? All right. Motion passes.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. 10B, motion to approve February 16, 2021 vouchers in the amount of $581,201.97.
Second. Seconded by Councilmember Kurt. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? None opposed, motion passes.
C, motion to authorize the purchase of fireworks for 2021 in the amount of $11,500.
Second.
Second.
Okay, a couple seconds, and I do see, we're going to call for discussion. I see Councilmember Foyer's hand up, and I have a couple questions as well. Go ahead, Councilmember Foyer.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any questions regarding the cost of it. As I look at the agreement, the agreement calls out services for the next 3 years with a $500 increment, which is not a big deal to me either. I just wanted to verify, is this consent agenda item for 1 year or is it for the 3?
That was exactly what I was going to ask. So not quite sure who needs to address this because Jen, the agenda bill is to approve 2021, but 2022 and 23 are on there as well.
It should have been for 1 year. It should have been for 1 year, not 3. So I can look into that and get back to you.
Okay, so is this something we can just postpone and bring back at another meeting for the signature?
Yes.
Or Sean, can we approve it? Can we approve it?
Approve it as amended.
Yeah, as amended with just 2021 on there?
Yeah, the council, if they want to only approve it for 1 year, they can approve it for 1 year and take it back to the provider. If they want to agree to a grade, if they don't, then would be no agreement.
All right, thank you. Councilmember, or Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy, and then Councilmember Foyer.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. My question was for, let's say in the rare instance that something happens where we're not able to have the fireworks this year. Is that money spent or is it forward for the next year? What happens with it, with the contract with these providers?
I can actually weigh in on that, Mike. There's a reschedule and a cancellation fee schedule in the contract. Depending on how far in advance you cancel, it's a different percentage.
Very good.
And
Go ahead, Jen.
I know last year when we were up in the air whether we could have the fireworks or not, they were very workable with postponing it even through Labor Day.
and even into October. So while it's not written in the contract, they did offer some flexibility, particularly because of COVID.
Thanks, Jen.
Councilmember Foyer.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is there any reason not to entertain doing a 3-year commitment for a $500 increase?
That's what we've done in the past. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what fireworks cost these days, but $500 a year doesn't seem too bad.
It's about what we paid the last couple of, about the same increases we've incurred the last several years as well.
So is there a negative to doing that? That's my question. Thank you.
We're in, not from my side, council is free to discuss if anybody has any comments. If not, if we want to amend the motion to approve for 3 years, we'd have to hear a motion for the amendment.
Either give us an motion to approve a 1-year contract or give us a motion to approve a 3-year contract.
If I can interject, Mayor, did Mike make a motion and the second
right
with regard to the current contract, which would be for 3 years? So if the council wanted to just vote that way, then they could approve for 3 years. If they wanted to make amendment, they would have to do a separate motion to amend, second vote, and then back to the original one.
Right, that's what I was after.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy.
Well, the question would be this. It says specifically 2021, but what we're seeing is that elsewhere it was written for 3 years. Right, okay, very good. I'm comfortable with that.
So do we have a motion to, thank you. Somebody go ahead and state it if you want to go ahead.
I would proceed. I'd make a motion to authorize the purchase of fireworks for a 3-year period of time in the amount of starting at $11,500. Does it have written in there the $500 increment?
Yeah, there's different amounts for each year. It's in section, where are we?
Section 3.
Thank you.
Okay, please read that into it then.
In point of order,
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
didn't our attorney say that the motion on the floor as stands is for 3 years? So we don't need to do an amendment? Did I hear that right?
For one.
No, it's
That's-
motion
that's correct.
for one.
Okay.
As long as I heard it correctly, that there was a motion and second for the agreement as presented, which is for the 3 years, that would be on the table for consideration. If you wanted to
Okay.
only
All
make
right.
it for a year, then you'd have to make a separate amendment to vote on that.
Well, I thought the motion was read off the agenda, which says purchase of fireworks for 2021 in the amount of $11,500. I believe that's what Mayor Pro Tem Kennedy had moved.
Right.
So we need a motion to amend. I'm struggling here with the best word.
So here's the disconnect. The disconnect is that what the agenda had it for just 2021 when the contract itself has for 3 years. So I think what we could do is just do an amendment to add the additional 2 years under the terms of the contract.
Okay, so we need somebody to make that motion, and then we vote on that revision, and then we vote on the original.
Go ahead, somebody jump in.
Councilmember Langford.
Yes, ma'am. Can we just please pull this, put it back on later when the two verbs agree? Okay, it's not too much to ask that the consent agenda be correct.
Jen, do we have a timing issue with this at all? Is it a problem to just scratch this one and bring it back to the next meeting?
No, we can do that.
Okay, I've got Councilmember Dunn and then Councilmember Foyer.
Madam Mayor, I move that the consent agenda 10C be amended to include the words 2021, 2022, and 2023.
Okay.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor of amending the request for to amend the consent agenda to reflect 2021, 22, and 2023 for a total of, give me just a second, I will give you the total.
$36,000.
$36,000. Any discussion on that change? All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
One opposed. A motion passes to amend the agenda bill to read 2021, 22, and 2023 for a total of $36,000. Okay. So now, right, the motion passes 5-1, okay? And now we're back to the original motion to approve the contract.
As amended.
Yes, any discussion? All right, so all in
Actually-
favor of approving? Yes,
No discussion. Go ahead. Draw the vote.
Councilmember Langford?
Now that you've determined that this is going to be for 3 years, when is it all payable? The first year, the second year, the third year, one each a year? What?
Each year.
Each year
If
it's
it's each year, why
specified
are
in
we
the, it looks like
paying
3,
36,000? If it's for 1 year, why are you passing $36,000?
we just amended it to the 3 years. And if you look at the contract, each year is specified with with the separate payment date.
So it's a 3-year contract payable in individual years.
And has this been budgeted?
Yeah,
3 years worth has been budgeted.
for 2021 it's budgeted.
Oh, now you're back to just 1 year. Okay. So is it going to be for 1 year or 3?
The contract's for 3 years. It's been budgeted for 2021. We have not approved any budgets whatsoever for 2022 and 2023.
All right. You just encountered us for $30-something thousand.
Okay.
We haven't approved the contract yet. Any further discussion? Sean, may I move ahead with vote on the 3-year contract, or do we have any issues?
No, go ahead. You may vote.
Okay, Bill, real quick.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, do we have the authority? I guess I understand what Odin's saying. Do we have the authority to commit ourselves to funds in 22 and 23? And if
We approve multi-year contracts regularly.
Okay.
Okay, so call the vote on the 3-year contract for fireworks 2021, 22, 23, total of $36,000 over those 3 years. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. And get hands just to make sure I got everybody. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 5 yay, and any opposed? 1. Okay, motion passes 5-1.
Madam Mayor, I'm just super excited that we have the first event on the city's calendar. Got to tell you. We get to put something on the calendar for the people in this community. I'm excited.
Well, moving forward, we'll put something else on there. Consent agenda D, motion to approve the project manager position and salary range.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion on the position and salary range? Councilmember Kurtz.
I just had one about the salary range seemed a little high for someone with an associate's degree. I'm assuming you guys did some market analysis of the position and everything.
Yes, Heidi, did you want to jump in?
Yes, RJ did a wage study, and when Katie and I spoke, the skills required of this position are specialized engineering work with technical skills. So we aligned that with the, I believe, Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, the building inspector position, because it as well requires similar skill sets.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi. Any other discussion? Oh, we got an echo all of a sudden. All right, all in favor of the project manager position and salary range, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Was, Councilman Kurtz, was that an aye or a nay?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I got that right. Okay, motion passes 6-0. Yeah, I don't know where the echo is coming from. All right. Okay, go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem. Unless I push something. Okay, go ahead. We'll keep working on that. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, if I understand, we're moving on to consent.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, consent agenda E, motion to confirm mayor's appointments to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee.
Second.
Okay, moved in second. Any discussion? Not hearing any. All in favor of the Lodging Tax Advisory Board Advisory Committee, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, great. Motion passes.
Motion to approve F, approved purchase. Approved purchase and sale agreement of 23 acres with the Leary Lake Sewer and Water District.
Second.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion? I'm going to ask one real quick question. Katie, you mentioned an issue with the title. That's not holding this purchase and sale agreement up, correct?
Sean, you spoke with, the attorney for the district. I do not believe it's holding it up. They're just working on the language.
Okay, so we're okay to go ahead and,
title insurance.
okay, so we're okay to go ahead and vote on this, Sean?
Yeah, there's no issue. With regard to the title policy, there's language in the agreement addressing that in section 8.
Okay, all right, thanks. I just wanted to clarify that since that had been brought up. Okay, any other discussion on this item? If not, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion passes.
Very good. G, last item, motion to approve interlocal agreement with the City of Cheney regarding building review services.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded by Councilmember Kurtz. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, consent agenda is passed. All right, so next item, we don't have any public hearings or appeals. We do have a resolution in front of us for the lift project. And
Okay, thank you. Resolution 12-164F. City of Liberty Lake, Spokane County, Washington. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Liberty Lake, Spokane County, Washington, approving certain public improvements and other public improvement costs and providing for other matters properly related thereto.
hold on a sec, we're still.
Excuse me, Mayor Pro Tem, are you hearing an echo?
Yeah, really bad echo. It's hard to tell. Was Ann through?
Yes.
Okay, she's.
I'm not sure. Can everybody hit their mute button? We'll try to figure out where this came from.
If you can hear me, I will move ahead with a motion to approve resolution number 12-164F, updating the lift projects.
We have a second?
Second.
And then,
Second.
thank you, moving second. RJ, would you like to run through this?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So before you is the updated lift projects. We've had some projects in the past that have been completed that have been removed. One example would be Orchard Park. We did talk with Greenstone just to make some modification on prices because we have better numbers, but it didn't change the bottom line for their total. We did add the Cataldo Avenue extension. There's a phase 1 and phase 2. This is related to Western States coming in, but the the work being done is all public improvements. Just for the public to know, council to know, all this work on here are public road or sewer, water infrastructure improvements. We also added 41,000 for Orchard Park on the sports court resurfacing. And then on Henry Road, we updated some of our numbers because we had, since the last time this resolution was approved, we had better figures when it comes to right away, what our construction costs we think are going to be, and then also just highlighting what Spokane County's contribution into the what for the resolution process is. So,
Right. Does anybody have any questions for RJ before we move to vote? Like, do you have any? Okay, all in favor? Resolution 12-164F. All in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, I see 6, none opposed. Thank you very much. Resolution 12-164F passes. All right, we're on the ordinances. And if you're willing to try to join us again. So Anne's on mute. Hold on, Anne, we're trying to get you unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
We can, with no echo so
Okay.
far.
Okay, since we've deferred the first read ordinance on 269B, I'm going to read first read ordinance for 234A. City of Liberty Lake, Spokane County, Washington, ordinance number 234A. An ordinance of the City of Liberty Lake, Washington, amending City of Liberty Lake ordinance number 234 relating to a code of ethics.
Now, typically, we just do this on the first read. I know we had an option on the table of moving of suspending the rules and moving this to a second read.
I move to suspend the rules and take ordinance number 234A to second read tonight.
Second.
Okay, and motion by Councilmember Severs, second by Councilmember Dunn. So any discussion on the suspension of the rules? Go ahead, Phil.
I'm curious as to why we need to do that tonight.
Councilmember Severs, since you made the motion, I'll let you answer. Go ahead.
Sure, I think we've had great discussion. I think the intent of this, and I'll follow this up with, I think there are specific things out there with applicants for the council position this may affect. So there's full transparency, but I think the intent of the council has been clear. We had great discussion last council meeting. We've had good discussion tonight that we want to loosen these rules up a little bit to make them the guidelines a little bit clearer. Also that a family member outside of the house of a council member should not affect a council member's ability to run or a family member's ability to keep their job.
Councilmember Kurtz.
I think before I'd be comfortable voting on it, I'd like to see the final language because I feel like we talked about a lot of things tonight, but I don't think that we saw the actual language.
So right now we're voting on whether to suspend the rules and take it to a second read. So I saw Councilmember Dunn's hand up.
No, I called a question on that motion.
Yep. Councilmember Langford.
Yes, I agree with Annie. We haven't had sufficient results of the actual verbiage, so I'd like to see that first, regardless for whether we're going for a fast track or not. It's immaterial. It's a discussion period, and the discussion is that this is not ready to move forward without the proper verbiage.
Councilmember Severs?
The votes for whether or not we want to call the second read, but I'll just share that if we move to second read, I will be asking that we move so with an amendment under, let's see here, 110.3, paragraph 6, to amend it, first line to change is a member of the city council to is a member or a spouse is a hold public office. I'll also be asking that the verbiage be changed to in the same home as the public official or employee per Annie's request in our discussion from earlier.
So if there's no further discussion on suspending the rules, I'll go ahead and take the vote on that. So all in favor of suspending the rules and moving ordinance 234A to second read, please indicate by raising your right hand. I have 2 in favor of suspending the rules, and those in opposition, raise your right hand. And 4. Okay, so the motion to suspend the rules fails 2-4 or 4-2. So we will not be moving this ahead to second read tonight. So given that, when this comes back to second read, I suggest at that point we can bring it back with the discussion around the proposed other language. Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, point of clarification. Does the city's ethics policy in its current format preclude any of the nominated or candidate council members, council positions?
It does.
So it doesn't affect anybody from seeking a council position. However, it may affect an employee's position with the city, should there be a conflict as it's defined.
So I guess I take exception to that as action that I was trying to remember how Phil had placed this conversation. We are creating a preclusion for one of the candidates. It will create an conflict to their immediate family member. So we were creating, in my opinion, a very awkward situation for one of the candidates with whom we will be asked to vote.
That's correct. Anne, I saw you trying to speak, but I didn't hear anything.
Oh, no, Madam Mayor, I don't have anything to comment.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Kurt.
So if we're bringing this back for a second read on March 2nd, right?
Correct.
And we'd be, I mean, okay, that was it. I don't, sorry.
Okay. All right. So, so we are now on to emergency ordinances. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to remind everybody, when we were talking about having the interviews on the 22nd and 23rd, there was also, we talked about the possibility that we might be able to get back into City Hall. And the idea would be, is it to stretch the meeting to the 2nd for that second interview. If that's the case, in the second meeting, this could come up on the city council meeting on the 2nd, which the changes could be made, which Annie and Councilman Langford are questioning. And those changes could be made. We could address it on the 2nd if we were willing to take our interview instead of the 23rd and move it to the 2nd.
Point taken. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Okay.
Madam Mayor, I would just, sorry, I want to, in observation of that remark, say to leave to chance whether or not one of the candidates' spouses job will be eliminated is a little bit awkward, again, for the candidate for that role. So thanks.
Understood. Councilmember Kurt.
Is there more than one candidate that we're talking about?
Not that we know of.
Okay.
Okay, moving on in the agenda, we are at introduction of upcoming agenda items.
Thank you, Mayor. Our city clerk read through what March 2nd looked like. I have a note to send you all a doodle poll to identify a day in March to have our council retreat on Capitol facilities. I will also be working on the matrix of some of the workshops that you have identified. I believe that's it.
And that's on the agenda. We want to go through anything else? Okay. All right. We are back to, oh, go ahead, Councilor Langford.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're on.
Is there any reason that we can't have the verbiage corrected for that in ordinance and brought back to us the night of this the special meeting on the 22nd? It's a noticed meeting.
Very good point. I don't think so. Sean, do you see any reason why we couldn't do that?
No, you could do that. The only thing you just want to make sure is that you noted in the agenda that it's on there, that the rules only require 2 readings. It doesn't say it has to be at a regular meeting. So
Okay.
Councilmember Langford's right. We could bring it back at the next meeting, just put it on the agenda for a second read.
I think everybody looks happy with that option. Thank you, Councilmember Langford.
Thank you.
Okay.
So just for purpose of clarification, our next meeting will be February 22nd at 6 p.m. The first order of business will be the second read of this ordinance corrected as discussed, and I think paraphrased by Councilmember Sievers. And then following that, we will have the interview of 15 applicants.
Sounds right. Okay, we are at citizen comments. Todd, do you have anything from anybody wanting to make a citizen comment at this time? We do not. Okay, that being said, I'm going to check the time. So we do have an executive session on the schedule. We have 36 minutes left before the end of the regular meeting. I think we should be.
Why don't we all have to log out and log back
Yeah.
in? Why don't we all log back in at 9:30 for the executive session?
Okay, so we will, thank you for everybody for attending. We look forward to seeing everybody at future meetings, and we will be reconvening for our executive session at 9:30. Thanks, everybody. Yes.
Mayor,
Yes, sir. Yes.
can I interject?
No
So,
action will be taken
a couple
next
things. One, do we know how long it is? We need to say how long we're going to be in the executive session. Is the intent to be until 10 o'clock or shorter or longer?
I'll defer to Councilmember Langford if he asks to put it on the schedule. What do you think?
Before 10.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll start for 20 minutes for now, and if we need to extend, we can. And secondly, with regard to the RCW for Ann, it's RCW 4230-110-1 subsection I. Thanks, Mayor.
Great. Thanks, everybody.